It's 9 o'clock. Tell us when we're live,
We're
Andy.
broadcasting live.
We're live?
We are live.
Good morning, folks. This is the Town of Mono Council meeting on September 26th. The meeting is being conducted both in chambers and by means of electronic participation as permitted by Section 238, 3.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, and by the Town of Mono procedural bylaw. The Mayor, John Creelman, will be along shortly. In the meantime, as the Deputy Mayor, I am taking the seat. This meeting may be viewed live starting at 9 o'clock. The information as to how to do that is in the agenda, which is online on the town's website. We have a quorum. For the people in the audience, the emergency exits are straight behind you. And for the public's information, this meeting is being published and video recorded and broadcast. Councillors may declare pecuniary interest now or at any time during the meeting. Councillor Davey, would you please do the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Next, we would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Mono resides within the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Tionotonte, the Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. We also acknowledge that the town of Mono resides within the treaty lands named under Treaty 18, the Nottawasaga Purchase of 1818. These traditional territories upon which we live and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of the Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. Thank you.
The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. You've all got it in front of you. Are there any additions? Yes, Mr. Clerk.
Deputy Mayor Nix, I'd ask that we add a new item or an item to new business, which is a grant application to the county's Municipal Emergency Readiness Fund. This is an application that has to be submitted prior to the end of September, and it requires council endorsement to be submitted. Full details would be provided during the item on the agenda.
Okay, with that addition, are there any other additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I have a motion that council approves the agenda of session 18-2023 as circulated. Do I have a mover? Elaine and Melinda. You got that, Mr. Clerk, because I'm not going to write it down. The previous minutes, are there any comments or additions or changes to the previous minutes? Yes, Councillor Manklow.
Just a minor one. I don't have the minutes in front of me, but it's with respect to the Dorothy J. Needles garden and the naming of it. There was a problem of naming it, we felt, as a garden within a garden, and we talked about having it as a plot or a section or something like that, and the minutes reflected as being called a section. I don't think any decision had been made on that, so I prefer to amend the minutes to say a plot or section or other.
Yes, Mr. Simpson.
So, Councillor Manklow, the resolution passed by council was very specific, and the resolution was amended to state section and that the bylaw also be amended. So council did pass a resolution with the name section.
Well, I think that I'd like to draw back on that because the discussion was very ambiguous about whether to call it a section or a plot or.
I don't recall it being ambiguous. I agree. I think we decided we wanted section, so.
All right. It is possible, Mr. Councillor Manklow, that we could reconsider this. We are allowed to do that. Mr. Simpson, could that be added to, well, we've already approved the agenda. Could we do it now? Reconsider that motion?
We have to either repeal the bylaw or amend the bylaw, because the resolution gave authority to approve a bylaw as amended, changing garden to section. So that bylaw is enacted. Council can, of course, amend or repeal and replace the bylaw.
Quick straw poll among councillors. How do you want to handle this? Do you feel strongly enough about it that you want to amend it, Councillor Manklow?
Well, you know, it's a rather odd situation because the pollinator garden has its own management committee and makes decisions about what's going to happen here, and this is a kind of a parachuted in the thing without asking the garden. I think that we've said, yeah, we'd like to have it, and we've had a look at it, and we've reviewed it, and we find there's various problems with it. As you know, there's no plants there anymore. Well, there are 4 plants, and 2 of them are invasive. So the garden should have some input, I think, into this. We've already had one question from an outsider asking why the pollinator garden was changing their name to the Dorothy J. Needles Garden. So we need to look at the thing, look at it's a small matter, but I think that it should be left open.
I'm in your hands. Yes, Melinda.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was not at the last meeting, so I'm, clean eyes to look at just what was written about stuff. And it strikes me that section is an excellent compromise to add into garden. And it was fairly clear to me that they're not changing the garden or anything. They're just adding in something and wanting to acknowledge the woman who had organized it. So I don't know why the person who talked to you didn't understand, but it was fairly clear and seemed to be quite straightforward in the documents I read.
Anyone else? Councillor Capes, do you have a comment?
Well, I guess in the conversation, I was under the understanding that the actual pollinator garden management team was ready to take on accepting this, and I'm not sure why there's a concern now. I thought we were very clear. I thought it was quite settled, so
Okay, let me make this suggestion, Councillor Manklow. If you feel this is a strong issue, could I suggest that we ask the clerk to put it up on the agenda for the next meeting, and you talk to the management committee in the meantime and see what you want to do, and we could reconsider at that point by canceling the bylaw and voting a new one, okay?
There's a bit of an ongoing discussion among the management team about what's an appropriate thing to call it. And
So have that discussion.
I'm not against section at all. It was just that I thought it was a bit more open than that. We hadn't made that decision.
No, I think the motion.
I may be mistaken there, but so there is as the management committee sort of deliberates on this, we'll probably have some more information.
Okay. So then in the meantime, there's no amendments to the minutes. I have a motion here that council approves the minutes of session 17-2023 as circulated. Do I have a mover? Councillor Capes?
wasn't here.
Oh, you weren't here.
Wasn't here.
Ralph seconds it. No one opposed? That motion passes.
And
Yes?
if I just can make a point on procedure, you don't actually have to be at a meeting to move and approve the minutes subsequent. So you could have if you had wanted. That was the only
I
point.
thought you did. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I have no proclamations. We'll move on to public question period. Mr. Simpson, do we have any proposed or written, submitted questions?
Deputy Mayor Nix, we have not received any questions submitted online in advance for today.
Are there any questions from the audience? Bill? None? No questions from the audience? Good. I get off easy this week. We have a couple of delegations. Our first one is from the MPAC, and it's Ann Haynes, I believe, who's going to give us a presentation. You all have the presentation in your agenda package. Good morning, Ann.
Okay.
Does Andrew?
If you just give Andrew a second.
Oh, sure, no problem. Sure, so I'll just introduce myself again. Good morning, and my name is Ann Haynes. I am the Regional Manager in Southwestern Ontario with MPAC, otherwise known as Zone 1. And I do want to congratulate all of you. I haven't seen you since the election, and congratulations, whether you're new or whether you're returning and a seasoned council member. Certainly want you to know we want to work with you, and I'm happy to be here today. I have an entire team, municipal and stakeholder relations team, that looks after the town, and so just know that you have people that you can call if you have any issues and concerns, and we work very closely with your staff. And to start, again, our relationships are very, very important to MPAC. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of who we are, what we do, and just to start, we've got we are Ontario's property assessment experts, and our job is to assess and classify more than 5.5 million properties across Ontario. That is worth a combined value of $3 trillion in assessment. And in the past year, Ontario has grown more than 45,000 new residential homes, and in 2022, we added more than $37 billion to Ontario's assessment rolls. Every municipality uses our assessments to make informed decisions in their community, including the distribution of property tax. Ontario's property tax system and these assessments, as mentioned, generate approximately $30 billion in tax annually. And locally in Mono, I'm going to go through your figures at the end, but you've got just over 3,700 properties, and 2022. Heading into the 2023 assessment roll, we added just over $20.4 million in net assessment growth to your assessment base. So here are the 4 key players in property assessment and taxation in Ontario. We start with the province, who clearly, specifically Ministry of Finance, they are responsible for setting the assessment and taxation legislation as well as policy. They also determine the education property tax rate, and there's also an independent body, a tribunal under the province, that adjudicates assessment appeals when there's challenges by property owners, called the Assessment Review Board. So I do want to say the province is predominantly the law behind what we do. They write the regulations, they set the tax classifications, and all of that stuff. Of course, MPAC, we are an independent, not-for-profit funded by all Ontario municipalities, and our role is to assess and classify properties across Ontario, and we do this under the guidance of the Assessment Act set by the province. We are accountable to the province, to our municipal stakeholders, and property taxpayers through a board of directors that is comprised of provincial, municipal, and taxpayer representatives appointed by the Minister of Finance. Municipalities yourselves, you determine your budget requirements, you set your tax rates, you collect the property tax for services such as police, fire, recreation, water, and many other things in your community. And you use our assessments predominantly, and you establish your tax rates to determine the tax distribution in your community. The property owner I will touch on briefly. They basically are the ones that set the market. So when we're assessing the value for properties across Ontario, it's based on the sales. The people that are buying and selling are generally the property owners. They set the market, they set the base rate of what property is worth, and we simply analyze those sales to determine the valuation. And of course, they pay the property tax bill. In Ontario, we have a very large database. I talked about some of the metrics on the first slide. And as you can imagine, our database is a lot of data, very important to us, and we want to make sure that it's accurate and up to date. Data is continuously being updated at MPAC, so that your records and the municipal records that we share with the municipal staff can help them make the important tax decisions and decisions that they need to make day to day. So we assess new construction if somebody builds a new home or an addition or a renovation timely, and we have service levels that keep us to ensure that we're staying on top of it very timely. We respond to property owners when they have questions or concerns about their assessment and help them understand how we arrived at their assessment. And we also support the municipalities, meet with them monthly through the Dufferin County group, and then any other time that they ask for questions, we're here to support them. We offer them a lens to view our database through a portal called Municipal Connect. So they can actually go in and see all of your properties in your town and review assessments, classifications, changes that are happening, new assessments that are coming, etc. So it's a very important product that we give to them. And we certainly like working closely with municipalities. One of the big changes we implemented in COVID was the digital exchange of building permit or e-permitting information. So permits and plans coming to us electronically. So that was a big step. We also have to respond to statutory work such as requests for reconsideration. So this is a free process. If a property owner is concerned with their assessment, they come to us first and it's free. If they're not happy after that review, they can move on to the Assessment Review Board that I mentioned earlier. So the Ontario's property tax system is based on everyone paying their portion of what it costs to deliver community services. And to do this, all properties are assigned a common valuation date, as noted before. Everyone is assessed at that same date, and this principle is known as current value assessment. This is the price a property might reasonably be expected to sell for if sold by a willing seller to a willing buyer after appropriate time and exposure on the open market. So in mid-August, just prior to the AMO conference, the provincial government announced a review of Ontario's property taxation and assessment system and committed to deferring reassessment until this review is complete. This means that property taxes and assessments will continue to be based on a January 1st, 2016 valuation, and that's that common valuation date that I spoke about. So we share the government's interest in ensuring accuracy, transparency, and fairness of property assessment, and we're ready to contribute our assessment expertise to this review. While MPAC is not responsible for setting tax rates or collecting property tax, we welcome the opportunity to work with the province to ensure the property assessment process is optimal for our customers, and that's both municipalities and property taxpayers. So I want to start by addressing a question you may have been thinking after you heard the minister's announcement. First, what does this review of property tax and assessment mean? And second, how does the pause affect our work at MPAC? So on the review, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information for you there or answers right now, but we certainly look forward to working with the government, municipalities, property owners, and stakeholders so that the property tax assessment system remains fair and transparent. And as to what it means for our work, I talked earlier about all of the database changes that we do, analyzing sales, severances, requests for reconsiderations, challenges at the tribunal. We are still picking up new assessment. It's still keeping us quite busy. So when there is an assessment update, we just pivot to more analytics, but we're still continuing with that growth and those changes to the database. So after we assess a property or change someone's assessment, we mail the property owner a property assessment notice. Sometimes property owners don't agree or understand their assessed value, and they may want to connect with you as counsel and ask you questions. So we just want you to know that if they do disagree with their assessment, it's important to remember that our property assessments are not taxation. If you get an inquiry from a property owner, you can help us by asking them a few questions. Number one, could they have sold their property as of January 1st, 2016 for that assessment value? Have they visited About My Property? That is a portal for property owners to go in and view sales and other assessments in their area. And decide whether they need to file a request for reconsideration or if there's a change. And if they've used that same portal to search out comparable assessments within their area. So these are things they can do some homework ahead of time. If they still disagree and they think their assessment's too high, they can certainly file that request for reconsideration. It is free of charge, and they also have the ability to file an appeal afterwards. So it's the fastest way to start a review is starting with us, having a discussion with us, calling us, and we'll be glad to answer their questions and help them. So let's just spend a minute to address some of the relationship between tax and assessment. So assessment distributes tax, they don't determine tax. The most important factor is not how much your assessed value of a property has changed. So this is typically in an assessment update year. People are always concerned how much my property assessment's gone up. So it's not typically the issue of how much it's gone up. It's more how much it's gone up in relation to the average increase in your town and in the classification. That's the important thing for owners to consider. So there's been a bit of a myth versus facts campaign that we've used, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit further in this update. So we shared a resource with the CAOs last fall, and a lot of municipalities have put, there's a little video in the top right corner on the slide, on their websites for property owners to understand. And again, this was in anticipation that there'd be another province-wide assessment update coming. Of course, I mentioned it has been paused, but we've got this communication out there to address these misconceptions about the relationship between assessment and tax. So you have the resources you need, and I'm not going to play the video, but if you haven't loaded it onto your website, again, it's a very helpful resource to just sort of help people understand the process. One thing we often hear from municipal leaders and from property owners is property assessment is complex. That's why we've been communicating more and more with owners to help them understand who we are and learn how to get more information. So again, you may have seen on social media, we've been very active with that myth versus facts campaign, what we do, what we don't do, what assessment does, what tax does, and distinguishing the two. So that's why we're going to continue to do that. And that social media has really debunked some of the common misconceptions about property assessment and tax, how taxes are calculated and levied. And as part of the campaign, we created that video, as I'd mentioned. It has more than 175,000 views on our website, so it is picking up some traction. We also launched a program to give property owners information when we're in their area to provide advance notice. So this happened during COVID when we could get out and we could go to properties to let them know that we'd be arriving and inspecting their property in a specific time frame. So the owner has a chance there to learn again about when we're coming and why we're coming, and then ask us any questions while we're there. We've also modernized our portal About My Property on mpac.ca. Property owners have free access to the details we have on file about their property and reassessment, review reassessments and sales information for properties in their neighborhood, and find out what to do if they don't agree with that assessment. And as of today, we have approximately 450,000 About My Property registered users on the portal. And since we launched a redesigned version of the application in November of 2020, we've added another 180,000 new users to the system. So a 40% increase, and that is without an assessment update. So people are still paying attention and tuning in. We have, when we did redesign About My Property, we improved our search features that made the application easier to navigate and understand, and we also added a new online portal to collect their school support information, because that's another job that we continue to do electronically, so they don't have to, do it by paper. They can do it right over the online. We've introduced a new request for reconsideration process and enhancements on how to browse within their neighborhood on the portal. We actually had this portal featured as an exhibitor in the Transparency Showcase. It's a virtual exhibit of innovative and impactful transparency projects by public institutions, curated by the Office of the Information of the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. So we're proud to be featured among other impressive projects in this showcase and are pleased to do our part to promote Ontarians' access rights. So here is your assessment base in town of Mono. You can see the property code categories on the left and the numbers, the total assessment value for each of those property code categories, and then the percentage total or the distribution. Obviously, you're almost at the 80% mark with your residential, so no surprise, you're right in with everyone else in Ontario. And then you can see you go into farm and then commercial and special and exempt and whatnot. So you can see the percentages there that make up your total assessment base. If you haven't already, I'd like to encourage you to review some of our recent reports and learn more about MPAC and the work we do. So our 2022 annual report highlights where we've been and where we're going, and as we continue to focus our support on our municipal partners, stakeholders, and the people of Ontario. Our 2022 performance report shares our strategic and operational performance in assessment services, stakeholder engagement, operational efficiency, and customer service. And the 2022 Municipal Partnership Report offers a summary of our efforts in capturing new assessment and how we're continuing to prioritize property owners and new products and services that we've introduced. And our newest report, the 2022 Enumeration Report, post-election, provides a review of our enumeration campaign results, as well as an overview of some of the tactics we undertook to achieve these. And we also share our path forward as we transition responsibly the PLE, or the Preliminary List of Electors, and the elections itself over to Elections Ontario. So they take that on effective Jan 1st, 2024. You can also find these publications on our website, mpac.ca. And if you've not already, make sure you subscribe to our e-newsletter, In Touch. and which can be done through our website. We also have a library of digital resources I mentioned earlier. We also host monthly webinars for staff, and I know some council have signed up through eTouch and joined those as well, to have a more in-depth assessment and discussion on certain key topics. So I know that these have been well attended, and if you can't make the webinar, you can always play it back. They're on our YouTube channel. I have provided you with my contact information. I've given everybody a card. And as the regional manager, I just want to let you know I am in the process of recruiting for an account manager. So John Hebden was formerly your account manager in this area for years. He's moved into a new role. So I'm now hoping to get that recruiting starting soon. But in the meantime, I've given you my information as well as Kelly's. If you have any questions, and I want to thank you for your time today. And I'll take any questions at this time.
All right, is anyone on council? Yes, Councillor Manklow.
Thanks for your report, Ann. Do I understand that a new point in time for property values has not been yet decided?
Correct.
Anyone else? Councillor Capes?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Davey?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. 2016 just
Ralph.
seems like such a long time ago.
It was.
Your mic, Ralph.
No, thank you very much.
Well, I had several questions.
Okay.
I guess the first is I'd like to understand the impact of using the January 1, 2016 valuation date. Let me try to think this through. So that's the assessment they're using on my house is based on January 1, 2016, and the tax rate is set by the town. Now, if all property values in the town of Mono went up, I don't know, let's say 20% over the last 6 years, I'd have a new assessed value, but the tax rate would have gone, we basically all would be paying the same amount of taxes. The only reason there might be I was going to call it a funny impact, is let's say higher end homes have gone up faster in value than, I don't know, townhouses or something. Then in effect, by sticking to the January 1, 2016 assessment date, we are, okay, if we did have a more current assessment, we might get different taxes for different sized or different valued homes. Is that correct?
Yeah, whenever you reassess, there is that full redistribution, and depending on the buying and selling of the property owners in your municipality, whether condos are worth more than homes, or waterfronts worth more than non-waterfront, or farms worth more than what have you. There's always pockets that go up above the average or within the class of the residential class above. So there will be shifts in that redistribution. You're correct.
So then here's the real key question. We have to use the January 1, 2016 assessment, but in the meantime, you've been collecting newer assessment data, so you've got that in your computer.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense as to whether real estate values or assessment values for different types of homes have gone up faster or slower than the average? In other words, is there sort of quite a hidden imbalance here when and if we do go to a new assessment date?
So what we've been doing since we got through the 2016, that 4-year cycle, which would have been from 17 to 2020 taxation, we've been continuing to analyze the market and watching for trends of what's moving where. So we are well aware, and we keep adding new sales, as you mentioned, and reviewing them. So it has gone up since 2016. I don't think anybody would be surprised at that comment.
But if some have gone up more or
Some
less
have
than
gone
others?
up more than others. That happens every assessment update. It's not uncommon for that to happen. So right now, they're paying based on what they were in 2016. When a new home is built in your municipality, or a new development comes to town, and we pick up those new houses, we have to backdate those values to 2016 so that it's apples and apples with their neighbors, and everybody's paying that fair distribution within the municipality based on the tax rates and the budget that you've set. So we're continuing to give you revenue, that 20 million that I talked about on the onset, that you received last year going into 2023. You'll have more going into 2024 for next year. We're going to continue to boost your base as much as we can. If there are challenges in assessments, sometimes that chips away at the growth, because if somebody gets a reduction in their assessment, they kind of offset one another. But in your case, I don't think that's a big issue with assessment appeals, so.
All right, now, we have the mayor here now, but I'll give the...
Sure.
Yeah, I have another question.
Okay,
Now,
sure.
this is a difficult one, but I get this question from some people on some occasions. You say we have 742 properties that are farmland, and they get taxed at 24% of the residential rate. But here's my question. If I'm a farmer, I've got 100 acres, but the back, I don't know what the assessment is on that, but you would know that, but the back 10 acres are bushland. So every so often, MNRF flies an airplane over the town of Mono, and they take pictures. And they come back and they say, oh yeah, you get the agricultural tax rate of 24% of the residential, but you're only going to get it on 80 acres. Your back 10 acres are going to be taxed at the residential tax rate. Now, first of all, is that statement correct? I mean, I've been told that's how it works. And I have some, quote, farmers who have also got a hefty increase in their tax bill, and it turns out it's because the back end of the property is not being farmed, being actively farmed. It's bushland, so they get taxed on that portion of it at the residential rate. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, so I'll just say that farms are unique. They are a little unique, and if you qualify for Agricorp's farm tax incentive program, which you get the 75% off the residential tax rate, they
76%
make,
Dufferin.
or whatever it is, they make that determination, not us. So they just simply share that data with us and say, these are the properties that qualify. They come up with how much, all of that stuff. So we're really not involved in that process. Now, there was some legislation that was passed earlier this year called farm forestry exemption, where there, depending on the size of the farm, you may have qualified for an exemption of some of the property. And we went through every farm in Ontario and had to apply the regulation and the legislation and issue what we called special amended notices out to property owners and to the finance staff so that you could adjust your records on these properties. So I can't speak exactly to, sorry, I can't answer exactly your question, but we are not involved in how many acres Agricorp or that group
Okay,
says,
but you
same
are,
as managed forest.
you do say that we have 742 properties that are farmland.
So they're farm
That doesn't necessarily
property
mean that,
codes.
okay, so then that's
not
where you
classified.
okay.
Yeah.
So some of us 742 properties could be a 100-acre farm where someone from the city of Toronto has moved up and built a nice big house and enjoys 98 acres of bushland, but you've classified it as farmland.
but if
And then
they-
it's up to MNRF to decide.
It's up to Agricorp to confirm whether
Agricorp, okay.
MNRF does the managed forest program, the tax incentive program, and conservation land program, and then Agricorp handles the farmland tax incentive program. So they tell us how many acres qualify, and we simply apply that. And like you said, if there's 100 acres and 80 qualify and 20 don't, then yes, part of it would be at the RT rate and part of it would be at the FT rate.
Okay, that's the end of my questions. Anybody else? Mayor Creelman?
Yes, and my apologies. I have tons of work people around my house this morning. I had to get them all organized, or they had to organize me. Increasingly, we have properties that are not really being used as a pure residence or rural land that is not being used as pure rural land. To give you an example, and I apologize if this has come up, and I know I'm stealing the thunder of one of my colleagues here, but the tendency for Airbnb and other short-term rentals to monetize a, quote, residential property. They pay the same taxes as somebody who is not choosing to do that. We have rural properties that are increasingly are being used contrary to our zoning bylaw for commercial purposes when they're not supposed to be. What can we do as a municipality to have those properties properly and accurately assessed for what is actually going on?
So we are legislated by the province. I talked about the key players early on. The province sets classifications for the resident and what fits into each classification. They specifically define what is residential, what is multi-residential, what is farm, what is industrial, et cetera, commercial. So they set that and we implement it. So if we want to go to the short-term accommodations or the Airbnbs that you're referencing, in most cases it's cottages or homes and they're rented out. So that wouldn't change their classification. So you're right, their taxation is the same. You know, depending on the size, the age, the 5 factors that affect value, they're assessed similar to property in the vicinity. So until a classification or, you know, the government says that specific type of property gets this type of treatment, they set that. It's not actually MPAC. But what some municipalities have done is they've gone out and hired third party to license these properties, and then they pay the municipality. They have to register with the third party. We work with the third party to share data,
But what if
license
we
them.
were to take the position that the province should broaden its definitions? Is that done through regulation or is it legislation?
It's definitely regulation or legislation.
Regulation.
So there was in Zone 1, so I cover from basically Mono, Orangeville, Dufferin County to Windsor in my zone. And there was a council resolution passed out of Essex County earlier this year on that topic, and I know it circulated. So I'm not sure if it came before your council or not, but they sort of grabbed that and went with it. And there's been no change yet, so I think the province is aware of this.
And is there a review going on now?
I don't know. Yeah, we wouldn't be privy to that information because, again, it's specifically a provincial issue.
I know you
not so much
can only
impact.
work with what you can work with.
Yeah, and they set the rules and we just simply
Okay.
apply them.
And is that Ministry of Finance?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thanks very much. That was very informative.
You're
I'll now
welcome.
pass the gavel to John.
Thank you. If I can
Yeah,
catch up on the paperwork here. Okay.
so we just finished the first delegation, and now we have, well, the second delegation is scheduled for 10 o'clock.
10
So
o'clock.
I guess we continue on.
We've done question period?
Yep, there wasn't any.
Thank you. Okay, so let's proceed to unfinished business and deferred items. List of unfinished business. Any questions or comments on the content? Mike, followed by Melinda. Okay, we're fine. Any questions on the list, Melinda?
Well, thank you, Mayor. This is great. We're working through this. It's changing. We've added the information. I still think we need some more information because there's some blank spots. But I just kind of wonder, like the dog thing. It's been a year since it was brought to us. It seems kind of simple-ish, and yet the date on it is, I'm not looking at it this second, but it's longer than I would have thought it should be. So can you tell me why?
Well, I've got it on for Q4 2023, so we're just about into Q4 2023.
Then it was a misreading on my part because I thought it was 2024. Okay,
Okay,
great.
let me just, nope, I've got it,
Okay,
Q4
then it was a misreading
2023.
on my part, pardon me. So excellent work. And then just one other little thing. I know I'm right back from Scotland, and apparently I'm a Davies, that somebody dropped the S. But we dropped the S. So again, on the list is my name spelt incorrectly. Now again, I might have read it wrong, like 23, 24, but could we not do that?
We absolutely can correct that mistake.
And that's it. I'm glad that the thing's going, and I have no other questions.
Ralph?
Just wondering about the large residential home planning report and the planned public meeting for August, last August. Is there an update on that, Fred?
I will call on the Director of Planning to provide an update on that, who is joining virtually.
Dave?
No, it's on.
Dave Trotman? You're muted. We can't hear you. Still not working. Maybe we can double back to Dave. Sure.
Yeah, log out, log in.
I think you're going to have to log out and log back in. Anything else? Okay, we'll catch up to Dave on that question because I think it's an important one. Pending Dave's return, next item on the list is a motion by Deputy Mayor Nix regarding kite flying. Right?
Yes, and I think I circulated to all of council members the Oakville motion. Now, in discussion with the town clerk, and I appreciated that, Mr. Simpson, he points out the real thing we want to prevent is not necessarily someone flying a fighting kite. The problem only becomes a problem when fighting kites let their debris fall on other people's property. So I'd like this motion to go forward, and Mr. Simpson, if in your wisdom you look at the Oakville resolution and you give us some options, maybe we don't want to follow blindly what Oakville is doing, or for that matter, my understanding is Orangeville is going to be doing it too. Maybe we want a simpler bylaw that only makes it an offense if you have a fighting kite that ends up with debris falling on someone else's property. Maybe that's the real crucial issue.
Linda?
Thank you, Mayor Creelman. Yeah, that was my reading through of it all. That's exactly what I came up with, that it says, and your comment was that it has undesirable effects. It's kind of like, but what are those undesirable effects? It's pollution and it's disrespect of your neighbors, and those kind of things I think should be itemized out. And the Oakville one makes reference at the beginning to health and safety, but it doesn't really itemize specifically what our beef, as they say, is. So I concur. I think we want something that's really specific, because we don't want to be exclusionary, but we also want respect.
So with the motion as it is.
I'll read the motion so that we can talk further about it. Whereas the town of Mona has had experience with groups who engage in kite fighting, and whereas the results were not desirable, therefore be it resolved that staff are instructed to examine the recent bylaw passed by the town of Oakville and any other similar bylaws and report back to council on the feasibility of the town of Mono passing a similar bylaw. Do I have a mover for that, Deputy Mayor? Seconded by Councillor Davey.
And could we then just leave it as sort of oral instruction
Yeah.
to Mr. Simpson that look at the Oakville bylaw, but take into account what we just said about what the real issue is here when you bring a report back?
Well, it strikes me that a single fighting kite is sort of beside the point, because the whole objective of a fighting kite is to bring down another kite. So personally, I'd stay pretty close to a definition of a fighting kite that is somehow enabled to bring other kites out of the air. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. But I don't want to ban kite flying per se, but there's a particular kind of kite that is equipped with razor blades and special kind of wire and various other things that in combination with other kites, whether they be similarly equipped, does create litter and potential harm to wildlife and so forth. Elaine?
Well, any kite flying, any flying of anything like balloons, et cetera, when they get let into the environment are causing a problem. So it's not that the results are not desirable, it's that it causes pollution. It causes endangerment to animals, potential endangerment to humans and animals. So I think that's what's not desirable, whether it's a fighting kite, if you want to define it that way, and then you're going to have to get into a fighting kite description equals, or if it's any kite flying where people are just letting kites fly and they get stuck in trees and their string goes with them. So it's a little more complicated than, it's the debris that's left behind by engaging in activities that let debris fly into the air and into the trees. So I don't know. It's,
Thank you, Mayor Kerman. Yeah, Councillor Capes, that's a really good point. Like the whole gender reveal, let's let all the pink balloons go up and everything. Like, where do they go? I end up with those Mylar things on my property, I don't know, a couple times a year. So, and I'm just one little guy. So maybe that is what we need, is something very broad, so that we're not pigeonholing ourselves, so that they come along and, I don't know, they turn their fighting kites into fighting balloons or something, right? And get around us, a loophole. Maybe we do need something broad.
Well, Fred,
You've got your work cut out for you.
I think you're hearing a number of different things here, but can we call on you to bring back something that makes sense and addresses, I think, both the contest aspect of fighting kites, and obviously we don't want a replication of what we've had this summer, plus maybe something that addresses airborne litter.
I will endeavor to bring a bylaw back for council's consideration.
Okay. So I have a motion on the floor, and I think I have a seconder. Any opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Next item on the unfinished business is the Orangeville Fire Services Agreement. And Elaine?
just a question, because I might be misremembering, but I know that when the new agreement was revealed to us with this 26% increase in the first year, there was some conversation that you were going to have with them about can they even that out instead of, but I don't know what happened with that conversation. But.
They said no.
It's
And not,
very
notwithstanding
collaborative.
the fact they put the brakes on their own fire hall development. And that's the part that really bothers me, is that presumably a portion of that was towards the fire hall. Another portion of that would have been towards new equipment. However, Fred Simpson tells me that much of that 26% increase has already been paid because we're far enough along in the year that it's sort of a moot point now.
Except that we could claw back the next few years.
And my understanding is the 26% increase was largely because the Orangeville Fire Department hired 8 new full-time firefighters for evening work rather than just relying on volunteer firefighters. They now have full-time employees overnight. And they claim because of that we get better service. I don't want to dispute that, but that was their argument going forward.
Ralph and then Melinda?
I think that's valid, Fred, but there was 2 options, you recall, on service options. I think A and B. So we accepted B, which was the service option, which was available before they had hired the new 8 new people. I look at this number as being far too much, and I think we should go back at them again and tell them we're very unhappy with this. They should get a strong message. We'll have a budget which is over $1 million for Orangeville alone. I think it's $1,041,000. Not quite sure what our total fire service budget is because I don't know Caledon's, but without Caledon's, it's $1,400,000 for all of Mono. So I don't think Orangeville is supplying, they would be supplying 65% or so of the houses or units. I don't think they are. So it's just disproportionate cost from Orangeville.
Linda?
Thank you, Mayor Krillman. Yes, right, so that's what I was thinking, that it's an awful lot of money, but then on the other hand, all of the fire boards, and you're right, I don't know about Caledon, but Rosemont and Shelburne had ginormous increases. It's coming, population's increasing, the amount of work they're doing is increasing, they're all needing equipment, building new fire hall is terrific and everything, but it's really based on the fact that, you know, they need to have a place to put another truck because the community is getting bigger and their work is getting more, and so they need a building, right? So it just, I'd like more. I don't agree with you, Councillor Mangtalo, that you know we need to push back. I think because this is the third one to come to us with a big new budget. or a big, in the last year. It was like later, when you say the money's already been spent, they were already asking. The other ones asked last time, now they're asking this time. And so I think it's just clear that things are costing way more money. But I'd like more detail about it all. I'd like to know that, as you say, that we're really truly getting for Mono the service that we want, because certainly we could, as I gather, there was another way to do this previously and has changed. When you say choosing A and B, that's before my time. So I just kind of like more information. But it is unfortunate, and I think we all as taxpayers it's a service that it's costing us more money all around.
There's another issue, and that happens to be salaries for the Orangeville Fire Department. They apparently are not tied to the town's stated COLA of 2.0 or 2.5% this year. They're negotiated independently. So my question would be, what's the presumption vis-a-vis salaries in the numbers that we have received? And if their presumption regarding salaries is low, depending on how they settle with the firefighters, are we going to have a further increase? Fred?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one further comment on this issue. Going back to the service delivery study done by the county, and it made some recommendations on fire service in Dufferin County. And now that issue of how we get fire service has risen again, and there's going to be a consultant hired to look at it. As I pointed out several years ago, and I'll point it out again, one of the dangers, if we take the recommendations of the consultants who did the service delivery study, which was to either take something like the Shelburne District Fire Board and make it a fire department of the town of Shelburne, is then we are simply helpless in terms of any increases like this. We have no legal authority to tell Orangeville to back off. They provide the fire service. By law, we have to provide fire service to our residents. The only thing we could do is tell Orangeville we're going to build our own fire department, which I can hazard the guess would be so darn expensive. It's just not possible. So we're really helpless, which, to get back to my main point, is when this next study comes out, Mayor Fiddleman, about how we are going to do fire service in Dufferin County, keep this issue in mind. Right now, with Rosemount and Shelburne, we have some say in their budget and what their costs are. With Orangeville, we don't.
Yeah, this county study will be very interesting, and I think the options are remain the same or a county fire department. And my hope is that if the decision is to stay the same, some very strong marching orders are given to the local fire departments to cooperate on joint purchasing and joint training. No more excuses. No more, single purchases of bunker suits and so forth, which has gone on for years over the objection of many of us.
I have to defend the Rosemont Fire Department in this. They do meet as chiefs. The challenge they had was over COVID, as did everybody, but they do meet as chiefs. They do cooperate and coordinate where they can. There are only certain maximum numbers of firefighters who can be trained at the same time. Rosemont is like, if you read any of the study from that service delivery report, Rosemont is the shining fire department. I'm not saying the other ones are not good, I'm just saying.
That's excellent.
So they make sure they max out the number of firefighters at a training session. You can't have just everybody because you can't manage it. It's not realistic or feasible. So they make sure that they coordinate where they can. And so I just want to make that public.
I have to support Elena. I was on that board for 8 years, and they have kept the line. They're not increasing their hugely. It's just Shelburne possibly and Orangeville. And I really think that we should send a strong message back to them that we're not happy with this. I think that, do I expect that's going to make a change? Probably not, but it's important that people know we're not happy with it.
Okay. Well, I haven't even put the motion on the floor, anticipating that it wouldn't have any traction whatsoever. And I think we will leave it off the floor until we get some further information unless we need to pass something today, Fred? Are they going to cut us off?
They have already asked when it would be coming. They thought it was coming last meeting, and it didn't. Orangeville did follow up to ask. I told them it was on this meeting, the agenda for this meeting. So Orangeville will certainly be querying what the council's plans are with respect to the fire services. We're going to be almost a quarter year or a full year into a 4-year contract. So
I don't know why they're worried, because they're getting paid.
okay.
But Your Worship, I mean, I agree, and I'll agree with Councillor Manklow to send a strong signal. We, by law, have to provide the service, and we don't have any choice. We have to sign the agreement with Orangeville. So I think, quite frankly, we can hold our noses, but you've got to put that motion on the floor.
Elaine?
I appreciate we are responsible, but we also are responsible to the taxpayers to make sure that we are paying reasonable amounts of money for the services that we are getting, or the best negotiated service cost. So if they were spending 26% on something in the first year that they did not spend that money on, then I think there's an opportunity to renegotiate those remaining years. And like I said, and it may sound ridiculous, but claw back on the other years of service in those increases and say, we'd like to not pay those. I mean, it's a conversation to say, what did the 26% cover? If we understood it was for one thing and it's not for that thing, then how was that money spent? And how does that impact the years going forward? Is there a change? Is there an opportunity to look at that? I don't know.
Can I suggest, if there's a division of opinion as to whether we introduce the motion, that we do so and amend the motion to say, subject to a representative of the Orangeville Fire Department attending Mono Council to answer questions?
That'd be great. Sure. I like that.
What if we said no?
It's subject to? How do you feel about that, Ralph?
So Your Worship, so you're saying, so the resolution would be amended then to not agree? Because right now, the resolution says council approves the signing of the agreement. So either council approves it or doesn't approve it. I think you're kind of, so if a resolution is to ask Orangeville to make a delegation prior to approving this, but if you say you're going to approve it subject to, there's a bit of a...
Well, I was thinking more along the lines that we can say that we've passed a motion to approve it, subject to their attendance to answer some questions, and...
No.
Oh.
We would like them to appear before we make a decision.
Okay. Are we fine with that?
I can live with it.
Okay. No, that is the preferable way of going. It's very clear cut. So do I have a motion that we invite a representative of the Orangeville Fire Department to attend the, hopefully the next meeting of council to answer council's questions? Councillor Capes, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Okay, I don't know whether we have our next, it's not quite 10 o'clock yet. We could probably knock off the Dufferin Board of Trade lease agreement matter. Hmm?
Yeah, we can do it quickly. We can do it quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So any staff input on this? And I'll read the, Les.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As my memo says, this was negotiated with DBOT and Mark Early. Very similar lease agreement as in the past we had before. The only one addition is we agreed to do the snow plowing on their driveway. Not a big deal for us because we have our sidewalk cleaner out there anyways parked. So before that the person would go out, do the sidewalk, he would quickly clean up the driveway and off they go.
Okay.
I'd just like to congratulate staff
Yeah,
and
thank you.
finally getting around to doing this.
Thank you very much.
Melinda?
Thank you, McCrimmon. I have a question. If it's month to month, but we're going to pay it quarterly, so then, but it's only 60 days to,
Well, it's effective October 1st. So we'll, once council agrees to sign the agreement, we will send them a bill for 3 months.
right, but going forward, the idea, the agreement is that either of us can get, because I think, I don't know, I mean, just reading between the lines, D-Bot's looking for other things and so on, right? So that they would pay and then we'd pay them back, and as opposed to really, right, right? As opposed to really month to month.
Correct, yeah.
So is it month to month? Right, because on the
It
one
is a
sentence, you
month-to-month
say
agreement,
month to
but the
month.
billing's on quarterly basis. Yeah,
And then you
a
say
little
it's a
con-
12-month agreement, and we're built, like, it said it all in this, that's okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between the Dufferin Board of Trade and the town of Mono to lease the premises forming part of the property described as 246372 Hockley Road, Mono, Ontario, substantially in the form as attached as Schedule A to the bylaw, and that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Would you like to move that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Capes. Any further discussion? Any opposed? That motion is carried. So I don't know if we have the delegation here from the Hockley property. Yes, we do. Yes, good morning, sir. If you could give us your name. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, am I being referred to?
We can hear you, yes. Go ahead,
Okay,
sir.
great. Thank you. My last name is Stavrakos, Stavrakos. First name Constantine. I am legal counsel to the Fine family.
Okay. We have the written, your written submission, your letter, but if you would like to amplify upon that, please proceed.
I would, if I may just have a moment. Is it possible to put up the letter or particularly the photos?
If you just give us a second, we'll get those on screen. And you would like us to jump to the photographs?
Yes, the first one would be on page 4 of the letter. There we go. Okay, thank you. I'd like to first thank your worship and members of council for inviting us here to speak today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity. The Fine family purchased the property in late 2020, and when they purchased that property, the buildings that we have shown in this correspondence were in a substantially the same state. They were advised by the prior owner that they had not lived there for years, and it appeared that no one was living on the property. The main home, which seems to be in the best condition, had broken pipes and flooding in the basement. It's clearly not at that time in a livable condition. What is being referred to, what we believe is referred to as the cottage, which you see there, had a collapsed roof, and you'll see as well, it's clear that the masonry on the top of that building is in poor condition. The milk house, the family has never really entered into because apparently it's become a nest of snakes, and they're hesitant to even go into that small building. Lastly,
Sir, if I can interrupt you, if it's possible to speak closer to the microphone so that we can better hear you.
Yes, I can do that. Let me just check to make sure I've got the right microphone working here, because there's
Thank you.
two setups. Oh, yes, that's the problem. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me better now?
It's about the same.
It's about the same.
Is there anything we can do at our end?
I don't think, it shouldn't be on your end, it should be on mine.
Okay. Try speaking as closely to the microphone as you can. I'm picking it up, but I'm just worried about the people in the audience and other members of council.
If you don't mind, I'm going to switch microphones to see if that's any better, and if it's not, I'll switch back.
Yes, please, that would be helpful.
Can I get a coffee while he's doing that?
It didn't look like that would be better, so I'm going back to the original mic, and I'm going to.
I think that is better.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so to go back, and I'm not sure how much of that was heard. Right now, we have in front of you the cottage, and that what's referred to as the cottage is had at the time my clients purchased the property, had a collapsed roof, and you can see as well that the masonry in that on the cottage is not in ideal condition at the top end. If we could progress to the next set of photos. Okay. What we'll see here is a series of photos of the barn, and we can scan through them. But what you'll see is that the joists are rotting, and floorboards have collapsed, and generally it's in a poor state of condition. The base of it is also waterlogged, suggesting a high water table, and that may be undermining the structure as well. My clients have advised they don't dare go in there, and when they've tried, the building seems to almost wobble, and they're nervous that it'll collapse on them. So my clients, before they purchased this property, checked with the town to see if there's any heritage designations, and the reason for that was the poor quality, the poor state of these buildings made them quite apprehensive about undertaking the burden of trying to maintain or repair a number of them. And they're advised that there was no designation. Since that time, as you're aware, the process to designate has been initiated. My clients were not involved or consulted in that process, and I understand that the report was not even on the agenda for the original meeting.
Okay, we're still having difficulty hearing you, sir.
I apologize, Kim. Moving closer again. Can you hear me?
That's a little bit better.
Do you need me to repeat anything?
No, I think we're fine. You were indicating. It's all in the letter. Yeah, it's basically in the letter, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
I apologize. I haven't encountered this issue at all from this microphone, so I'm not sure why it's occurring. I'll just gotta do my best, and we'll see what happens. Now, there have been reports in the press that the state and condition of these buildings were being blamed on my clients. That is absolutely not the case. They purchased it in this condition. And that was the rationale for what seems to be called a forced designation. My clients are heavily opposed to a forced designation. They are willing to work with the town to figure out what's reasonable here, taking into account, what a reasonable burden on them would be and the pre-existing state of these buildings. But that's something that we'd like to see evolve over the next while, as opposed to something that's, a forced designation process. That's the substance of what I've been asked to speak to you today about. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if I need to repeat anything, I'm happy to do that due to the state of the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Staravakis. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I think the discussion would benefit from a description of exactly what a designation is and what it requires or does not require, because I think there may be some confusion over that. And I don't know how to proceed other than maybe ask the chair of the committee to join in the discussion with council. But I think the important thing is that we're all on the same page in terms of what a designation requires your clients to do, or whether it requires your clients to do anything.
I'm absolutely happy to hear from you on that. I am familiar with heritage matters, so I do know the implications of a designation, but I think my clients are here, so I'm happy to hear for them to hear that from you. And if you don't mind, if I may have a minute after the explanation, I'd appreciate
Sure.
it.
Elaine?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Heritage Committee, but I'm going to speak on behalf of council who have accepted the designation process and felt very strongly this property should be designated. I'm not sure what the relevance is of some of the content in the letter, and some of what I'm trying to hear has to do with us designating this property. What was the intent of the purchaser when they bought this property, if not to use the barn, use the house, and actually live there? So anybody, and I'm not going to say this applies to everybody, but in my experience and my knowledge within Mono, people who have bought similar properties recognized, first of all, the heritage value to the community of those buildings, and purchased them and refurbished them so that they would still be here and that they would be usable buildings. So I'm not quite sure what the intent was when the property was purchased. What was it purchased for, if not to reuse a barn that is a beautiful example of a bank barn, and also use that home, which I think is being lived in? So I'm not quite sure I understand the relevance of all of these photographs, and there's no blame laid here to anybody about the condition in which that property is. Things that are not maintained over years do deteriorate, and we recognize that. But that's got no relevance to the fact that we want to designate these buildings because they have a huge historical context within our town. So that's my...
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, sir.
My-
If you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would. My clients have invested significant funds in bringing the main home back to state of habitation and being able to live in it. So I don't think it's quite fair to suggest that they are not.
I'm sorry, sir. I cannot hear you at all. The volume is not good, but it's not the volume. There seems to be a lot of static, and I'm not sure why.
I can't answer that. I don't know. I'm not sure why we're encountering that issue. I am wondering, I don't know if it would be useful for me to sign out and sign back in, if that, maybe it's a connection issue. Would that be
Yep.
helpful to
Let's
try?
try that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you want to take a short recess, Your Worship?
Yes, let's take 5 minutes.
We are broadcasting live.
Thank you.
Mr. Stavrakis, I think the sound is much improved. I would just like to introduce you to the entire Heritage Committee who are present here today, and we have two of the members who are prepared to engage in discussion and maybe elaborate on what a designation is and what it is not. So, Mr. Stavrakis, is it possible to defer to them and then allow you an opportunity to comment or ask questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to suggest the same.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'm Barbara Jafflis, and I am chair of the Heritage Mono Committee. I want to stress that the importance of this designation is of great interest, not only to our heritage group, because although the entire committee is here, it is also an important landmark in Mono. I think we also need to stress that designation does not prohibit the owners from renovating. What it does do simply says that they cannot demolish the property. And I think that this is very, very important. Obviously, they knew the condition of the property when they bought it, and they should have recognized that the fact that the property was built in 1800s, it was worthy of designation. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten, who actually wrote the report on the Anderson property, and she can perhaps elaborate the importance of the Anderson farm on this community.
Kirsten?
Certainly. I'd like to say that I agree with Councillor.
You'll have to get a little closer to the mic, sorry.
Just want to say that I completely agree with Councillor Capes's comments, and as Barbara stated, designation prevents the owner from tearing the building down or any of the buildings under the designation. But it does allow them to make alterations, restoration, and in fact, if they wanted to put on an addition, they're allowed to do that as well. The owners did say that it was their intention to build a new home on that property, and but I would like to suggest that if they need more space, they might want to put on an addition on the existing home, and they can in fact do that under the designation. A lot of the council's report is referring to the condition of the buildings, and in fact, he is correct that the barns especially are in poor structural condition. However, the condition of the buildings is completely irrelevant to the criteria of the designation. In fact, if those buildings collapse tomorrow into a pile of rubble, the designation could still stand, because it is not. Designation has nothing to do with the state of the buildings. In fact, a lot of buildings are designated because they are deteriorating and need to be saved. And I know that that is the crux of their concern. However, that does not negate the criteria of the designation.
I did say I would recognize Mr. Stavrakis. Do you have any comments? And then I have members of council who want to weigh in.
I do. I'm puzzled by the statement that the condition of the buildings is irrelevant to the designation. I think that's the crux of the position that's being taken by the committee, and that's just not correct. That has not been what tribunals have been found on appeals. And quite frankly, it's relevant to the whole point of designation, which is to prevent demolition. If these buildings are structurally unsound and they have not been assessed by the town, then the correct thing to do is for them to be demolished. And quite frankly, the need to assess that structure and whether they're sound and whether they can be preserved in their current state or whether that's unreasonable is something that the town should have done before designation, and it is not done. So while I understand,
Mr. Stavrakis, we're having those audio issues again, unfortunately.
I don't know if there's any way to improve it, given that it seems to be some sort of connectivity issue.
Do you have a headset that has a microphone on it that you can?
I do not, and unfortunately, I've never had to use one before on any of these meetings.
Yeah, because it was very good when you first started, when we had a break. I don't know what's changed, but now all we're getting is static, and we can't hear you. Oh, could you call us on the phone, maybe? Could we get audio on the phone?
I just shifted one thing. Has that made any difference?
Try keep
We
going.
can't hear you if you're not speaking, I'm sorry.
No, you still can't hear me. Okay. Let me
Phoning in, maintaining your laptop connected, turning the mic off and phoning in is an option.
Let me do
You
that.
have the phone number.
Awesome idea.
Let's try that.
And if you don't have it readily at hand, we can read it out to you. Okay, Andrew?
I just sent you a message, but if you call 647-497-9391, the access code, enter this access code when prompted. It is 120-889-061.
Thank you. I'll be a moment.
Andrew tried to adjust to fix for his audio. Now the audio's a little rough.
For him as well. So, let's see if this
And then
works
once
any
you've done
better.
that, Andrew, with the adjustments that you've attempted to make to resolve the audio, it is now a bit broken for you as well.
Connection.
Yeah, you also have to turn your speakers off or they'll get that feedback. Your laptop speakers.
How's that?
You need me to speak so we can hear you.
Yes. Say a few words, sir.
Are you able to hear me?
Okay.
Are you able to hear me?
If I could suggest, you probably have your phone on speaker mode, maybe speak directly to the phone itself.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
Very good.
The wonders of modern technology. Thank you for thank you for your patience with this. I'm not sure where the problem lies, but I guess you can hear me now. So I don't want to go back over everything, but I will say that the structural soundness of the buildings is a relevant criteria to designation.
it is something that tribunals have considered in past matters regarding designation. And we have buildings here that have been neglected for a very long time, and there's clearly a serious question about their structural soundness. Before any steps towards a forest designation should be taken, those buildings and their structural soundness should be evaluated, and that has not occurred. Again, my clients are willing to work with the town, and to find something that we can all agree to, but a forest designation is something they'll strenuously object to.
Okay. Kirsten, did you have anything to add? Your mic? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm wondering if we can go back to Elaine's question about what was the owner's intention when they purchased the property.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer that. They clearly do want to live in the property and have put in considerable work to make the main home habitable. As I mentioned, when they purchased it, the pipes were all broken, and they have had to replace them. There's water in the basement. So there's work that needs to be done even to make that livable. However, they don't have infinite funds. So the ability to transform structurally unsound buildings into sound ones is beyond their means.
I think, let's see, I think Fred was first and then, and Barbara after that, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that, in a sense, you've probably already answered, but I'm the slow guy on council, and I want to make sure I understand this. I will confess that when I first read the letter and looked at all the pictures, my sympathies went out to the family, because I thought that by designating it, we were putting some financial obligations on them. However, I had a long talk with Ralph yesterday, who has talked to you, Kirsten, and my understanding, this is going to be the simple-minded question that you've probably already answered. By designating it, you put absolutely no financial obligations on the family to do anything with those buildings, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that my understanding is they could be designated. They've just said that they are fixing up the house to make it habitable, and then they could sit back and watch the milk house and the cottage and the barn, as you put it, Kirsten, just fall down. They could sit back and do that. Then my last question is simply this then. If one of those buildings is a safety issue, okay, I know, don't go in the barn, right? But if there are safety concerns with the structural integrity of some of those buildings, are they not permitted, not rehabilitated, but like that cottage with the caved-in roof? I mean, they couldn't tear that down. Okay, let me turn the question around. Would we be okay by just designating the house and saying the rest of the buildings, it's unfortunate, but they're past the point of being saved?
Well, I think the Heritage Committee, our position is that the main house, the milk house, and the cottage are the main buildings that should be protected. The bank barn is less important than the three other buildings. I should also say that the requirement for the owner to repair a building would fall under the property standards bylaw. But you are correct, the designation does not require them to restore the building. However, designation does imply that it's important to the community and that people should have pride in their, I mean, we have 12 designated properties in Mono. All of those were people, property owners who approached us and wanted the designation because they had pride of ownership in their building and they recognized the importance of the building to the cultural heritage of the town.
I'd like to check with the clerk on one of the things you just said, Kirsten. I'm not aware that our property standards bylaw would have anything to do with a structure that was structurally unsound. The property standards bylaw would govern whether the grass is cut or how many old vehicles you have, but I don't think it would actually, I don't think it could be used to tell a landowner that they had to do something to a structure. Am I correct?
That is not correct, Deputy Mayor Nix. You're referring to the community standards. The property standards refers to the exterior of buildings with respect to the Ontario Building Code.
But is it fair to say, Fred, that we have not aggressively taken advantage of or pursued that opportunity with people?
Like most bylaws, if it comes to our attention through a complaint or we observe what we think is a matter of safety, we'll call on the county building department for assistance with building code matters.
I can think of many buildings in the town that arguably should go down that road and aren't. We have not made that imposition on those property owners.
That's correct. Habitable buildings are our main concern because that's where health and safety is mostly involved.
Okay. Any, Barbara?
It is my understanding that people are now living in one of the buildings. Am I correct?
If that's a question to myself, yes. As I advised, the main building was brought back to a habitable condition, and my clients are now living in it, yes. Previously, no one was.
Can I ask if they, is it their intention to build a new house on the property?
That is my understanding. That is their hope. A second home.
Because I don't believe that property would be allowed to have two homes on the building, or two buildings on the property.
Thank you. That is a question. I have not had an opportunity to look into the zoning implications or anything of that sort, as we pertain purely on the heritage matter. Those kind of issues are within my purview. I do a lot of planning work. So in the future, if the client wishes to, I'll look into that for them. But I don't believe they had anyone giving them advice on that issue in advance of purchase.
Could I offer a comment on that?
Yes.
We have the precedent, Kirsten, in the town of Mono, of several landowners coming to us asking if they can build more than one home. We had allowed one property owner to build 5. It's all one. Well, no, it's the issue of whether you can build 2 homes on one lot, and we've allowed it in the past. So I think we've set the precedent that if they came and applied for it, to be fair, we'd have to say, I think they could build another home on that
I
property.
think it was the NEC that prevents that, not the town. Yeah. And they're on the NEC. Can I just read 2 clauses from the Ontario Heritage Act? One of them says the council of a municipality may pass a bylaw providing for the entering into of covenants with the owners of real property for the conservation of property of cultural heritage value or interest. And it also says the council of a municipality may pass bylaws providing for the making of a grant or loan to the owner of a property designated for the purpose of paying for whole or part of the cost of alteration to such designated property on such terms and conditions as the council may prescribe. And I think my understanding about what Fred said is that I don't know if Mono has this in their bylaws, but I know other towns do, that the bylaw is written such a way that heritage properties are required to be kept up. I'm not sure if that falls in ours.
I see our planner, Dave Trotman, has come online.
I hope you can hear me now. To answer the question about a second home.
You're badly echoing.
Okay, let me see if I turn my volume down. Is that all because I'm close to my laptop? Okay, I got to get the microphone on this laptop fixed, and it's going to help me afterwards. But for now, the acreage of that site, providing it meets the various parameters of the zoning bylaw, would be considered, could have consideration for a second home on it. But again, there's a cluster requirement. It has to be within a certain proximity of the primary dwelling being used, just to enlighten council. That would be an application for minor variance if it was beyond the 50 meters, but if not, it's an as-of-right permission, provided we meet the test in the zoning bylaw. It's zoned rural, it's designated rural, this property, which I understand to be 6934-322 Airport Road.
Ralph?
Kirsten, you were reading there, the first reading indicated something about entering into a covenant. Can you elaborate on what that's all about?
Sorry, I've
Sounded like an
closed it now. but-
Sounded to me like an opportunity to discuss what might be done with the properties.
After consultation with the Municipal Heritage Committee, the council may pass bylaw providing for the entering into an easement or covenant with the owner of the real property for the conservation of the property of cultural heritage value or interest.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I suppose that means that the council, you could do a deal with the owner, I suppose, and create a bylaw that,
Dealt with their specific buildings?
yeah.
That's my reading too.
understanding.
And it's interesting to me that Mr. Stavrakis has indicated an interest in talking to us about the properties.
Yeah, and I would like to make the point that if their intention is to build another home on the property, then that would indicate to me that they have the money to repair the roof on the cottage.
Council?
I don't think it's fair to base designations about, speculating on the intents of owners or to speculate on their finances. It's another one thing to build a home, and there's an extended family here. That would be the basis for it. That would be habitable and that'd be serviceable to that. None of those buildings will be brought into that state. It'll be a useful home to live in. I would add that there was a question about what the specific provisions in the Heritage Act contemplated, and I have worked on them before. So the contemplation here is what's called a heritage easement, which is where you enter into a mutual agreement with the landowner regarding preservation. It often falls short of designation, and you work through the issues in a cooperative manner as opposed to an adversarial.
Well, I think the issue is that we have started the designation process, and the question then becomes: do we stay on that path, or do we go to a plan B, as it were? I know where I stand on that, and I'm particularly impressed with the argument that was previously made that. The designation doesn't put a burden on the property owner from a financial standpoint. I mean, it would be nice that a designation alerts a property owner to the significant community interest in a particular property. I dare say that property could be designated simply because Shelley Anderson lived there. That in and of itself is significant to this community. And that is regardless of the architectural forms that are there or not, because you can designate based on, George Washington slept here. I mean, to use that old expression.
Comment?
Yes.
This is really a unique property in Mona. It has tremendous historical background. 5 generations of Andersons that lived there, and the last Anderson himself was an outstanding a person in Mona with many contributions from bluebird boxes to forestry. The houses themselves are landmarks. They represent a type of structure that's rare in Mona. Without any doubt, in my mind, that this should be designated as a heritage building. With the respect to the discussions we've had here today, I think that there is a chance to work with the owners with it being a designation. There's a chance to work with the owners to perhaps come up with something which is feasible for them and would maintain the designated values of the property. And I'd be open to further discussion, but we definitely need to maintain the designation.
Any other members of council want to weigh in? Linda?
Just a clarification about, so the cottage, the cute little thing with the roof falling down, If the roof falls down, the stone, and as you say, if you didn't never do anything to it and the roof fell down, then you would end up with a stone structure there that, and I just was looking at a whole bunch of stone structures from a, tour. So it still has meaning. That's the point, that the new family that's come in and wants to have a new or whatever is missing that point, right? That it doesn't. But the issue with respect to having your property insured, when you purchase a new property, your insurance company comes and has a look at it, and if they look at these buildings, it may be a big deal to try to get some insurance because you are, as a property owner, are liable. So is there a thing that you can't tear it down? Yes, you could restore it and so on, but is it also in the owner's abilities to kind of make things so that they're not going to be a hazard, but that they're still, as a structure, going to stay there? Is that something that they can do? Yeah, no, it was a question for him.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, what is the question?
So the question is, I'm looking at the little building, the cottage as an example. The barn, I can't quite tell because it's, close-up pictures of things. But there you see the whole building. The building looks pretty okay standing up. The walls are all still, except the roof. So can they take the roof down and make that a structure that is safe should someone wander into it? Or is that classified as demolishing it?
Well, technically, yes, they could take the roof down. But it seems to me it'd be easier to fix the roof.
Just saying.
Well, it's probably right at the knife edge as to whether
Right.
you can fix that roof or whether you should remove the roof and
Right.
deal with it as a stone structure, which.
Right, you could just have a stone ruin.
Right.
However, anything can be restored with, it's just money.
There's enough to work with there.
Yeah, if there's money, it can be restored, even if it fell down, so.
Mr. Stravakis, do you have any thing you'd like to add to the last parts of our discussion? Then I'm going to recognize the Deputy Mayor, but we're going to have to wrap up our segment soon.
I would. I'd say that for any landowner hearing this discussion would be very worried. There's a really mixed signal about what the town's intentions are here, whether it's going to require my clients to spend considerable funds to try to stabilize or structurally unsound buildings. There's a lot of back and forth on that. And it's not even clear what the property standards requirements are here. There's a mixed message on that as well. So the idea that the designation would not place a burden on my clients just doesn't seem to hold up. It clearly appears to place quite a significant burden on them. And I would suggest that a more cooperative process here as opposed to a forced designation, which is not something the town has done before, would be the right way to go to have the best results possible.
Elaine and then Deputy Mayor.
I don't believe we are putting a burden on the current owner. We are not saying designate and do this. We are just simply saying we are designating this property in recognition of the heritage that it brings to Mono that we strive to preserve, and there is no burden in doing that.
I was simply going to say I'm prepared to stay the course. We've passed a motion to start the process for designation. It's my understanding, I know I'm getting two different messages here, but from the Heritage Committee, they've told me there's no financial burden placed on the homeowners by this designation. And under those circumstances, I'm prepared to stay the course.
Is there any member of council who has a differing view? Well, sir, I think you've heard a very healthy debate, and I thank the Heritage Committee for attending in its full complement today, and the information that you provided has been of great assistance. And I thank the property owners for pursuing this, but I think council has come to a determination and is going to stay with it at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all the committee for showing up here. That's
Oh,
great.
absolutely.
Mr. Simpson has his hand.
Yes.
So there was a resolution to go with this item if you council wants to consider passing a resolution confirming its decision as a body.
Do I have a move? Is that necessary to confirm?
Yeah, this is an official objection. Council must give an opinion.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. And Councillor Capes?
I would also like a recorded vote on this, please.
Okay, so I need a seconder, and then we'll have a recorded vote. Deputy Mayor Nix seconds, and this is a motion to confirm the original decision of council.
The motion moved by Councillor Mangtalo, seconded by Councillor Capes, that council for the town of Mono directs the clerk to proceed with the heritage designation of 934322 Airport Road, Mono, in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. The call has been made. We'll start with Councillor Mangtalo. Councillor Capes?
Yes.
Councillor Davey?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Nix?
Yes.
Mayor Krillman?
Yes.
And the motion is carried.
Thank you.
So for council's update, I will bring a bylaw back. It has to come back by November 24th at the latest. So our council meeting will be preceding that is November 14th. Official notice will be posted and sent to the clients. The property owners or anyone else may file an official appeal during that 30-day notice with the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the 2024 budget deliberation schedule. Les.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the similar schedule we have always kept in a non-election year. It's basically a three-part process, capital projects by department heads. We look at the CPI and one of
Can you turn your mic on, please?
Was on.
I can hear you now.
the schedule is the same.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, thanks, Les, and I would just point out to my fellow councillors that we have the first, not that this determines anything, but we have the first 11 months of the CPI change over the past year, and the average for those 11 months is 4.6%. Doesn't determine anything less, but just for council's benefit, that's where it stands now. So we're waiting for one more month's data.
Yes, if council recalls, last year's 12-month average was 6.5, and council selected 4%, which the county did as well at the time.
So I have a motion the council approves the budget process timetable as outlined in the treasurer's report dated September 18th, 2023. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Capes. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion's carried. OPP Policing Contract extension. Is that yours, Les?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The staff is recommending a 2-year extension to our current agreement. Normally, we would try to have a longer contract, because our current contract expires, was a 4-year term. But with ongoing, with the changing of the police boards, the new legislation that's coming, there's a lot of unknowns. So at this point, we're just recommending a 2-year extension.
Okay.
Keep it simple.
So I have a motion, and we can have discussion, that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw authorizing the town of Mono to extend the police services agreement from December 31st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Capes, seconded by Councillor Magdalo. Any further debate or discussion? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is the Cardinal Woods Drinking Water System 2023-2024 inspection report. Fred?
Unless, Ralph, you want to go first. I again have to say to staff that I'm worried about the competency of our operator. In saying that, we had 3 non-compliance reports in the Cardinal Woods system. We've got 2 more now, sorry, in the Island Lake system. We've got 2 more now in the Cardinal Woods system. But just the same as the Island Lake system, it's difficult for me to judge the seriousness of these non-compliance ones. The first one, it seems fairly simple, and I think it's significant. Under the drinking water license, the maximum flow rate is 7 liters per second that we're allowed to draw. Now, if I read it correctly, in June of last year, they did allow it to go above that because we had a shutdown of another well, and they increased the flow rate, and that was all legal. But then in August of last year, without any, as I understand it, without any permission or even notice, they changed the flow rate to 7.4 liters per second. And my understanding, that violates the license we have. That seems to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but that seems to be a fairly serious error. The other error, the second non-compliance, it's difficult to understand. In Martha's writing up of the report, it just says, the following instances of non-compliance were also noted during the inspection, full stop. What? There's nothing stated as to what the non-compliance was, but if you read further down, it sounds like that we weren't inspecting. As I understand it, there's a time period to do the inspections of equipment, 2 to 4 months, and it has to be done within that. And we missed it 3 or 4 times last year. Again, but I stand to be corrected, these seem like fairly serious deficiencies. So I want to hear from staff. Are you satisfied? We've got 5 non-compliances now in the last year. Do we have a problem with our operator?
Deputy Mayor Nix, I'll take that for Matt. Matt filled in for me last week in my last meeting in my absence on the water issues. And until we provide our full staff complement, I will continue to work through the water issues, and Matt will stay with roads and bridges. No is your answer to the respect of whether the operating authority is causing us concerns.
Sorry, no, it's not.
There's no concerns at this end with respect to these items. Okay. The first item was a fallout of the failure of MW3. When we, and if council reads between the lines, and I've talked to council significantly in the past, that MW1 and MW4 are not providing the system with adequate backup. So we had to haul water in during that failure of the MW3. What did happen here was an operator did not put the pumping value for MW4 back to the 7.0, and it was put to 7.5 liters. So the attempt was there to get it back to compliance. But the training and the steps moving forward for the operators will and has commenced by the time of the writing of this report. We've been after the ministry for 3-4 years now in the permitting branch to allow us to pump MW4 and MW1 at a higher rate to match the 18.2 liters per second that comes out of MW3. This is a serious concern of ours. We've provided the ministry with the data that we believe is satisfiable on the effects of the drawdown on Menorah Creek, and still there's no response from them to allow us MW1 and MW4. So between the lines, it's a problem with the operators and the training has happened, but we need to push these 2 wells to provide us with safe backup. We're not concerned on this. With respect to the second non-compliance, it's a 20 to 40-day window to do the sampling. Orangeville was providing sampling once a month, so if you got May 1st and June 30th, you're in non-compliance. Although we did provide two samples within the monthly requirement, and the MECP inspector repeats that twice in that non-compliance item that we were out of compliance. However, we did provide monthly sampling, so it was the spread on the days that had caught the operating authority. The training and the standard operating procedure, which is very good to have occurred now, has been in place, and the operators are now trained and understand, and I believe they set a 30-day mandatory, which will give them 10 days plus or minus on the sampling. So the amount, and you can see by the amount of questions and answers in the inspections that these are minor issues in our consideration.
Can I just jump in here? I
Absolutely.
think any discussion of drinking water reports should be prefaced by some kind of statement that whatever deficiency has been identified is not speaking to the issue of the quality or safety of the drinking water, lest anyone watching or anyone viewing this at home think that there is an issue of safety or quality. You know, for want of a better expression, some of these deficiencies are more paperwork in nature, although they do beg the question that has been properly asked about the qualifications of the or the attendance of the operator. But I think it's very important that we understand that we're not talking about unsafe drinking water here as a consequence of this report. Having said all of that, I'm wondering whether or not the issue of the flow rate, was that increased to meet an increased demand given the time of year, or was it having more to do with the wells that are or are not commissioned and permitted to be used?
So when MW3 failed, the pump, we applied to the permitting branch to increase the flow rate of MW1 and MW4. It was a temporary exceedance that was allowed to get the maximum amount of them out of those 2 wells. And unfortunately, they only equal 14 liters per second. We were able to get around 16.3 liters per second out of those 2 wells. It still doesn't compensate for the 18.2, and the time of failure couldn't have happened at a worse time, which was June, July, and August, right? So our demand was at its highest, and sort of a perfect storm with respect to when it occurred.
If I can just follow up, and then I'll recognize Elaine. It strikes me that we may have a bigger issue insofar as the usage of water is concerned. And I remember having a conversation with Mike about this, that apparently the point in the day when the usage is the highest is when everybody's automatic lawn watering devices turn on, whether they are needed or not. And I think we need to do a little more in the realm of education, lest we get into rationing, which we should try and avoid doing. But if we've got a crisis because people can't adjust their lawn watering schedule or maybe cut back on it, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Elaine?
Well, I think that's a very good point, and, you know, we do need to conserve water, we don't, but people are paying for this water, and so they just pay for it. But a concern that you mentioned, Mr. Dunmore, was that MW1, MW4, you're trying to get approval from a ministry who's not listening. And that, to me, is worrisome. So what can we do to help you?
We're working through the process. They've asked us for another very expensive report to justification for the same, and these are due diligence on the ministry. I get it, with the Menorah Creek tributary at the forefront of it. So we're working through that process. Ministry has, the upper positions of the ministry have seen turnover at that time during this process. So we are still continuing to work for that. MW1 and MW4, they while they may come close to MW3, they still won't match it. So because of the turbidity that comes from the aquifer and the fractures in the earth at that point. So staff is working to provide council with some outcomes and some process with respect to this. Moving forward, with respect to the mayor's comments on potability, that's an easy paragraph to discuss when the memos are provided, and I can work with the admin department to make sure that happens. With respect to the water conservation, we have a draft website now that we're waiting to put out, to probably launch it prior to the spring. So it is something that we continue to work on after our initial discussions on the matter. But we're entering into our low demand season right now, so it's been set aside until prior to spring moving forward. And it would be something to the extent of every other day lawn watering, very similar to a lot of groundwater systems across Ontario.
Okay, and then with Ralph? Me? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I got a difficult question for you. When they did that test well in the Klondike gravel pit, and we were told by Chris Garrett that it had no impact on our Cardinal Woods wells. But you're saying these Cardinal Woods wells, there is an issue there about the drawdown of the water and the Menorah Creek flow rate. Well, surely, if a new well were drilled in the Klondike pit, that too, would it not have an impact on the flow of Menorah Creek? I know they drill down to bedrock, so it's 50, 60, or 70 feet deep, and they're getting it from the aquifer down there. But is there some relationship between that aquifer and the flow rate in Menorah Creek?
First comments with respect to the test well that was drilled in the Klondike by Aragon in their first attempts to find backup capacity. It is just that, backup capacity. Right now, MW1 and MW4 are not allowed to pump while MW3 is pumping. So the drawdown effects are the same. The same would result in the Klondike well, should it be, and it's been tested, but there hasn't been a 72-hour pump test done on it. It hasn't been through a rigorous test to see if it is acceptable as a municipal well, which would be the resultant of a EA environmental assessment that would have to occur. But the intention of that well is to provide a similar parallel capacity of MW3, so MW3 would not be allowed to pump at the same time as the new well. So the drawdown, while there may be effects to the aquifer, when the new well would pump, the other well would be off at the same time, at that time, so the effects would be the same.
But just if I could follow up, and surely this issue about not all the tests being done on this Klondike test well, it's germane to a hearing we're having before the Ontario Land Tribunal right now, doesn't it? I mean, don't we need that next backup well if we're going to allow 220 condo units?
You will recall the comments inside of the engineering letter, and it is exactly as you have stated, that in our opinion, the applicant is not satisfied stormwater, wastewater, and water. And council has reviewed that engineering letter.
Ralph?
Mr. Dunbar, I don't want to harp on this bit of accuracy, but I have, when I read through this report on the Cardinal Woods, I found two things which stood out for me. They may or may not be significant. One is the UV sensor checks, and the fact that 3 of the dates fell outside of the 20 to 40-day window. And then another one which I don't fully understand, which is automatic shutoff programming on control valves. And they had 4 of their dates fell outside of the 20 and 40-day window of time frame that they're supposed to be done in. So it suggests to me that, I don't know whether this is one of 1,000 checks or just one of a lesser, but that there's some lack of accuracy by the operators. And does this not disturb you?
Bothers me. Does it disturb me? No. There's a large list of items that the MECP inspector goes through.
Right.
I'm sure I didn't see the control valve shutoffs, but the UV sensors, I was happy to see that they were doing it monthly. Unhappy to see that there wasn't a 20-day, 40-day spread in it. So the SOP, which obviously wasn't in place, has now been created. And in my opinion, the solution has been provided. So,
sorry, the SOP, what is that?
Standard operating procedure, which all staff are trained on once they are written. And without fines like this, standard operating procedures don't exist. To me, it's a good find. They thought they were covering off their 12. They were testing the UV 12 times a year. It just wasn't in the 40-day window. So that to me, there's training, there's a action and a solution for this not to happen again. And that's what we've been seeing in the past is we're trying. There was a lot of repetitive issues that were occurring a couple years ago, but now we're seeing new issues that the inspectors are finding with solutions that have been provided.
Any other questions from council on the drinking water report? Okay, hearing none, we can move to the next item. We'll move to the next item in the agenda, which is the motion by Mayor Creedleman about amending the bylaw enforcement policy.
He's not here, so I would move to another item.
Oh, well, then we're finished with the new business.
Oh, sorry,
we
I believe
added one to new business,
I
yes.
believe there's a resolution with respect to item number 4 that we just discussed.
I apologize, yes.
Okay.
Can the clerk help me out? Oh, here, I got it. Here's the motion. That we receive the MECP 2023-24 inspection report for the Cardinal Woods drinking water system. Do I have a mover? Councillor Davey, and seconded by Councillor Mangtolo. Any opposed? That motion passes. Now we move to item 4, which you're saying, because we don't have Mr. Trotman, we should skip this one? Is that what council? Oh, Mr. Creelman is not there. Yeah, we've just moved to item 4, which is your motion to amend the enforcement policy.
Yeah. My apologies. I had an alarm go off at my house due to the electrical work going on. Okay, so the intent here was to put some more strength into the bylaw enforcement policy. Okay, this isn't a bylaw, it's the policy. And I submitted my thoughts to Fred and Mike, and we had a meeting and came up with what we think is good wording, and they had terrific ideas that were incorporated into this. And the format, as you can see, is that the red indicates a change of wording, and I'll take you through it. I don't know whether you want to waive the reading of the entire motion, but I can take you through the various sections of it. One of the major changes is that it does acknowledge that members of council could be contacted by residents it puts an onus on us to check out the complaint before filing a complaint online on behalf of a resident.
Can we comment on this change?
Yes, yeah.
I understand the intent here, but I've got a problem with it, okay? Take the most recent example where I had 2 residents phone me about a wedding or a party or something on the 25 side road. Now, I told both those people that they should fill out a complaint form. I think at least one of them did. But let's say they didn't, and I sent an email to the clerk about this instance. Well, now it says I would have to fill out the complaint form, and I would have to have firsthand knowledge of the alleged infraction. Well, I can't go back in time and listen to the wedding going on at 11 o'clock at night when the OPP were called. I mean, it's just impractical.
So there's two mechanisms. One is that the complainant provides permission for the complaint to be formalized. What I'm driving at here now is a situation where somebody, for whatever reason, does not want to go online as the complainant. They would like to see council do its job and step in and act on their behalf. And I think the anticipation here is that we should, at least to the best of our ability, check out the situation. Much harder in noise complaints, but not so hard in complaints of, say, transport trailer trucks being parked somewhere. But, Melinda?
Thank you, Mayor Krillman. Yeah, I have to agree with with Deputy Mayor Nix that when I read this, it's kind of like we're going back in time. We have new abilities here, which is terrific. Now that with online things, we're trying to encourage people, I think, to use so that we get some data. I mean, well, I've called 5 times and nobody answered me. That's what happened when I read those things, and then you hear that, well, no, there wasn't even a message, and it's just if there's a cut and dried, this is the new way to do things here. In order to go to the bank to get this money out, you got to go to the ATM. It's kind of an old problem that we're kind of going backwards now by saying that the counselor to do his job. I take exception to that, but then on the other hand, nobody phones me, they phone you. And so, and if they did phone me, which, call me, I would say that, help them through filling out the form. They've got the problem. They've made the complaint. I'm there to facilitate, but not to step in and do it, I don't think, is my thought on it.
Elaine?
I think that's a very good point, and it's much like the impact presentation we got this morning. It's not for us to go and do the research and go back to the homeowner and say, oh, maybe your valuation isn't correct. Here's how you can navigate. Here's how you can navigate this and that. The other thing is that if it comes in an email form, you have the person's name, you have the person's email address. I don't think we need to fill out some other online form to go with that. There's no reason why we can't set a tracking number on an email. So to me, if you get the email, you send it to the clerk. The clerk can assign a number to it and send it out into the, bylaw officer examination zone, however that works. I don't think we have to always fill out that online form. I think it's good to direct people there, to help them to do that, help them navigate that system, as you say. But I think if it comes in an email, we should be able to send the email, and the email should satisfy the fact that a complaint has been received. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I think we're getting a little too prescriptive in this kind of sense. And I think I do agree that it's not our job to resolve these issues in that way. It's our job to bring the information to staff. Staff know better what should be done, and they should be handling what happens next. So we can take it forward and say, we have turned this over to the clerk. You will get a response, and that's our end. We need to have service standards that say, if a complaint is made, there is a response to that person to say their complaint has been received and it's being looked at. And that should be in email. So I think we have the process to be able to handle these things without creating more work for people and making it simple.
There is nothing more prescriptive than insisting that people fill out a complaint form online, in my view. Well, no, I'm not talking about counselors, but if our position, which is currently, I believe our position is that you don't get to complain unless you fill out the form. Is that not correct, Mr. Simpson?
So no, we highly encourage people to use the form.
But what if I don't want to do it?
Then we give the person, I personally give everyone several options. I say the recommended process. First of all, it must be in writing. That's a requirement.
That's fair.
Okay? It cannot be anonymous. You have to provide your contact information. We ask that you use the online form. However, if you're uncomfortable with doing that, you can send an email, or if you're uncomfortable with that, you can write a letter. And failing any of those, you can come in person to Town Hall. To address the question that first raised by Deputy Mayor Nix and then expanded on in this discussion, the proposed changes to how a counselor handles a complaint is that if a counselor receives an email, they absolutely can forward that email. However, they do need to get permission from the complainant first, written permission. So we are saying you get it in email and it includes the contact information, then by all means, you can forward that, but provincial legislation requires that we have explicit permission. So that means in writing. So you just have to make sure you fire the email back, said, may I forward this to staff? And if they go, yes, please, then you send it to staff at that point.
That's what point number 1 states, is that you basically have to get the permission of the individual to forward the email to Fred. Point number 2 is, absent that, if a member of council chooses to make the complaint, that there is a little bit of responsibility there to check out the veracity of the complaint. In other words, if at all possible, I think in retrospective situations, obviously you can't, but in other instances you can. But I think it's important that that written permission piece be reflected in the policy, because that's what the law says.
I agree with that, for sure.
Okay, so I don't think we're far off the mark here.
Yeah, I can live with that. I just, sometimes I get complaints by telephone, and you're right. I guess I have to tell them, put it in writing. Yeah.
So what, can I just ask, just for clarification, so we have an online form that automatically, when you do anything online, it all gives data and everything all like easy. You just push the button and there you've got it. So now somebody's come into the office and filled out something with you, because that was option number 5, and some, like how does that then dovetail when you need to come up with your quarterly report for us on all these things? How does that dovetail in? Are you still then with pieces of paper all over and everything? Or does it ultimately get in that you'll be able to push a button and get us the info?
Staff is just transcribing on the complainant's behalf in that case if they come in person. Okay? So it all goes into the system. Bylaw enforcement does not get tasked until it's in the system. Okay? Ideally by the complainant, in lieu of the complainant not wishing to fill out the form or doing any other method and calling a member of council, by a member of council. But again, we think then the complainant becomes the member of council. And the idea of that second option of council filling out the form is in those rare instances when a constituent calls a member of council but is adamant they don't want their name attached to the complainant, then the member of council can fill it out themselves. But again, they now become the complainant, so they should have some firsthand knowledge of the of the infraction. I get it, noise is a tough one, you're not going to have firsthand, but, you know, there's some obligation for council to do some due diligence prior to becoming the complainant themselves. That's all that I think the mayor, in consultation with me and Mike, were looking for.
So I'll give you an example. I got a call from somebody I know quite well, and others know this person, and they were complaining about a cross between a storage and a wrecking yard that is developing in the town of Mono, and it is significant. There's over 17 vehicles and counting. He did not want to be identified with the complaint for a variety of reasons, so I undertook to file the complaint on his behalf and forward the photograph that he took from the highway of this collection of derelict vehicles that is developing. So this is just trying to create an opportunity for compliance with the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy law, as well as to remind us that we do have an obligation and to check out the complaints that we receive. And in this instance, I did. I drove down there. I'd seen it before and had casually mentioned it, but this then has taken on life as a formal complaint, and there are ramifications to that. Elaine?
Just a curiosity about someone not wanting to identify themselves. We don't share that information out anywhere publicly.
I know.
So
Try as you might, there are people who still don't want to be associated with the complaint, notwithstanding the privacy that we guarantee.
but they still are because they gave it to you. So
Well,
anyway.
I become the complainant. Ralph?
I know of two instances where people would not complain for a long time. Both of them were considering moving because of their upset. They did not want repercussions from their neighbor, which maybe in one case it already happened. And if they knew that I could apply for them on their behalf and act as the complainant, which is I think what you're saying, Mr. Simpson, right? I can act as the complainant, and their name does not go on this, so that maybe the next door neighbor can guess who it is, but there's no name there to come back up. So it is a big issue for people. In fact, one party has moved because of what was happening next door, and they would not be issued a complaint.
Fred?
And I do want to point out that communications between a member of council and a constituent are protected and are not FOIable. So any a constituency record is not FOIable. Now, you can't copy a member of council or a member of staff, sorry. As soon as you copy staff, it's no longer a constituency record. But a conversation between a member of council and a resident is protected. And so that's one, so when we're talking the vagrancies of MFIPA, this is one of the reasons why we give this option.
If I can move on to the next amendment, this has to do with our frivolous or vexatious complainant. It creates an appeal to council, which currently does not exist, and I think it's fair that if somebody is declared vexatious, that they have the opportunity to appeal that declaration to council. And it also makes clear that the discretion to declare vexatious is the CAO. And also there's a reporting requirement on a quarterly basis who has been deemed vexatious and whether they have opted to appeal the designation to council. So I think that's just an equity issue. Section 3.4 is a new section, and this formalizes the visit by the bylaw enforcement officer to a property, where in the past it may have been a verbal interaction with the property owner. This creates a a notice that will be given to the property owner, stating the nature of the complaint and timelines and so forth, that the name of the bylaw that's being contravened, and also a date by which compliance is to be achieved. So this formalizes that whole process, because you can get into a court proceeding where the first interaction is verbal, and it's, you know, like people's best memory. Second is verbal, third is verbal, before there's any paper actually handed to the individual. And I credit Fred and Mike coming up with this. It's a little different than what I originally proposed, but I think it's a great addition to the process, and creates a record that can be used in court if necessary in the future. Again, there's section 3.7. Again, expected timelines to come into compliance with the town's bylaws. Very, very important. It's not good enough to say clean it up. We need to be able to say clean it up within this period of time. And Fred and Mike, jump in if I'm misstating any of this. 3.9 is interesting, because there had been an ability to issue an order to remedy a violation in lieu of an initial warning, subject to it being an immediate threat to health and safety. That would be taken out, and the bylaw enforcement officer given the discretion to issue an order, notwithstanding the fact that it may not have anything to do with health and safety. And again, it's tightening things up. Elaine?
So just with regard to, like, you have to read this about 6 times before you get, whether it's a notice, whether it's a complaint, whether it's a order, whether it's a whatever. I find that a little bit confusing for people. So notice is something different than a certificate of offense, or an order, or an other written correspondence. So is there 4 different things?
Go ahead.
So the purpose here is to not tie the hands of the bylaw enforcement officers. So there is an order. That's a formal process. There is a offense notice or certificate of offense. That's a formal process. That's a Part 1 ticket. Right? And then we're going to create this other system of leaving some kind of written notice with the subject of the complaint when bylaw enforcement knocks on your door. So we're using all these different terms to give flexibility and discretion to the officers.
Okay, and so usually we have, you know, this is what this word means. Is there the dictionary that says this is what this word means, notice means, order means, written certificate means?
We could certainly add more definitions. An order is defined, as is the certificate of notice. They are defined, but they're in the Provincial Offences Act.
Yeah,
It's just, it's not clear when
okay.
people are reading that whole paragraph. There's a lot going on.
So I think we need a definition section, but correct me if I'm wrong, Fred. An order is made pursuant to a zoning infraction, correct?
Actually, not quite. So an order is pursuant to a bylaw passed under the authority of the Municipal Act, which is most of our bylaws. So order is in the Municipal Act in the POA. The zoning bylaw is a little different because the Planning Act uses a slightly different term. I haven't put that in there because we're going to use those things anyways. But that is a notice of noncompliance, because that's what the Planning Act calls it. Right? But the bylaw, the basic point here being something written. We could just say any form of written correspondence, but instead we've listed some examples.
And you know, I know it's confusing, but I guess to take it, complaint received. Bylaw inspector goes out and delivers this new notice that describes what's being contravened, indicates expected time to come into compliance. So that is a new.
So we didn't do that before?
We did not do, we did it verbally. We did not do it in writing.
Okay.
Certificate of offense is a situation where the bylaw inspector may feel that the matter is of sufficient import to write a certificate of offense then and there, and they have that flexibility under this policy, but it may also be subsequent to that new notice.
Is that more than a warning?
It's more than a warning. It puts you in court.
The warning, now the warning has to be in writing.
Now the warning, the initial interaction is in writing as opposed to a friendly chat.
Well, excuse me just a minute. I don't think it, okay. Where a violation of a municipal bylaw is determined to have occurred, a municipal bylaw officer may provide an initial warning, and it could be in person, by telephone, by email, or in writing.
So it contradicts that other one.
Yeah, so
Thank you,
it's
Fred.
not, he could do it by telephone.
Right, so again, what we're doing is we're creating this new written notice, separate from anything else. So an order is written and it's very formal. It demands compliance. A certificate of offense is a Part 1 ticket, so that's a set fine. When you're giving
Can I just interject? I'll read it again. A violation, a municipal bylaw officer may provide an initial warning and/or order.
Right.
In person, by telephone, email, or in writing.
Agreed, so what
So an
we're...
order does not necessarily have to be in writing. It could be by telephone.
If you use the word an order with a capital O as defined as under the Municipal Act is written. So we could alter that section slightly, but what we're saying is that the official warning, a warning, hate to use the word official, a warning is not a written notice, but now we're going to add to a warning, regardless of how the warning's given, in person, by email. We used to just give a warning, and that was it. Then we'd come back and follow up and see if they complied. Now when an order or when a warning is given, they're going to be given a piece of paper.
So this is in addition to?
In addition
Okay.
to that section.
In addition to.
Then jump down to section 3.9, and it says the municipal bylaw officer may issue an order to remedy a violation in lieu, again, it's order with a small o, so that could be verbal. You shall clean up these wrecked cars. That's an order.
Well, the purpose of today's conversation is to point these sort of things out so that we can address, if it's unclear, then based on today's conversation, I'll make some minor amendments.
If I may, it seems like we almost need a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, although it probably doesn't follow that.
Well, see, I'm avoiding that
Yeah.
because I want to give discretion to the officers to be able to apply this based on their experience.
Right. Well, yes,
Yeah.
but there still has to be the written notice or notice. So like, language is important, and labeling things as items like warning notice is one thing that everybody gets, no matter what. Yes? No.
The way it's intended is everybody gets something in writing.
Okay.
That's the change
Okay.
that Mayor Creelman is proposing and staff agrees with.
Okay.
They get something in writing. Now, that something will change in nature based on the situation.
Okay.
It may be this new notice. It may be a Part 1 ticket. It may be a formal order to comply. It could be a notice of noncompliance, depending on the bylaw.
Okay. well, that
Something
makes
in
sense.
writing.
It does away with the verbal interchange, basically.
As the only interchange.
Right.
Yeah.
It's confirmation of a complaint,
Of a violation.
of violation. Right.
So that's the intent, and it does sound like perhaps the wording needs to be tidied up a little bit. We were focusing on the changes being proposed. But to bring back a comprehensive bylaw, there should be a few other editorial tweaks.
Okay. Thank you.
So moving along to 3.15, this is already in the policy, but we have introduced the notion that second only to safety factors, this gives council the discretion to identify issues to be a priority. In other words, we could, based on this, and I would propose that we do it, we say that council prioritizes the trailer transport trucks higher than it does something else, parking tickets. I throw that out as an example, that we focus our efforts in this area, not necessarily at the expense of other areas, but ahead of other areas.
Just in that, if these were numbered safety factors, I'd give you a number, but there's the red one and then there's two black ones underneath. So impact on complainant, immediate neighbor, blah, blah, blah. Potential impact on complainant. They seem to be very similar. Could it not be just potential and impact without, like, why do we need two separate bullets?
We've already actually, part of that should be in red because we've already amalgamated two of the existing criteria into one. Potential impact on the complainant.
It's the same as the one above,
Is probably
in my
not
mind.
is probably not necessary, frankly, because I think it is covered by the line above. And available resources was very high on the old list, and we put it to the bottom here. In other words, our concerns are safety, priorities of council, impact on the complainant, immediate neighborhood and town, and then the question of vexatious comes into play, potentially, but not very often, and offer for formal remediation.
So
In other words, the person says, I'll fix it up.
Right. Question about available resources. We have two bylaw officers, so I'm not sure what that refers to.
I don't understand why it was in there to begin with, but I guess.
I mean, it needs to be a priority in my mind, and so we've got two bylaw officers. It is a priority. Available resources is not really.
Well, in the eventuality that council were to set a strict budget, then available resources may be a consideration. At the moment, we're addressing everything that we have, but even then, there's time's a resource, administrative, right? So for example, council has instructed bylaw enforcement to pursue signs. Well, we're taking, we're doing signs, but they're not our first priority, right? They're doing them as their availability, as they're doing other things. So it's conceivable, I guess, we could have bylaw enforcement out 35 hours a day each, and then there would be a constraint.
Everything we do has to do with available resources, everything.
Okay.
So why we would point that out here, I'm not sure, but we could say on a priority basis, like, if there's too much, what's the priority? So that we say on a priority basis defined by however that looks, but it just seems like
We're happy to remove that. It was the number one item on that list prior to this, and we thought putting it to the last consideration, but if council feels it shouldn't be in there at all, absolutely.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
The second last one.
You're going to ask the treasurer.
Offer for formal remediation. What does that look like? Is that something receiving the complainant and the town staff? Or
I think it's a situation where the person who's the subject of the complaint says, "Oh yeah, I can fix that," and says so in such sincerity that the enforcement officer accepts their position. A lot of stuff is resolved now on that basis. A lot of stuff, we never hear about because they say, "Oh, I didn't realize I was, I'd lit a fire too big, like I won't do it again."
This is an offer by the complainant.
Correct.
Well, that's not clear to me.
Okay.
Not the complainant, by the
Well, let's withdraw the claim.
person who's
The subject of the complaint.
The subject of the complaint.
Right.
Did I describe that correctly, Fred?
Yeah, absolutely. This just is what bylaw enforcement does day to day. 80% of all complaints, people come into voluntary compliance, and often it's a negotiation or a discussion as to when or how. And that's what this point is actually trying to state.
So the offer is being made by the subject of the complaint. Next section is clarifying or speaking to the issue of when members of council can step into the process, and it makes clear that the member of council, as being the complainant, can do so. However, it's very clear that once charges are laid, as an example, it's out of our hands. I mean, that's not appropriate to be involved in. However, we do expect the briefing in camera of the status of ongoing cases, and those would be cases before the court, and we have that now. Okay, good. Anyways, new sections, timelines. This is a definition of timelines because I started out with the view that timelines should be as short as possible. But I think this is a good definition, short as practical. And the town may proceed to an order, lay charges, or take other actions in the event that timelines are not met or good faith is not exhibited by the subject of the complaint. Little section on court process, what to expect. If you are in court, you're entitled to disclosure as soon as possible. Reasonable adjournments will be agreed to by the town prosecutor if requested to come into compliance with the town's bylaws. And this is an important one. We could lay a charge and then through discussion between the prosecutor and the subject of the complaint, come to the understanding that I'm going to need 4 months to address the issue. So prosecutor says to the justice, I'm asking for a four-month adjournment so that Mr. X can come into compliance. And those are almost always granted. However, it's understood that at the end of 4 months, if you still haven't done anything, you're off to trial. So it just describes the process. And the second point is probation orders. I'm a big believer in those, and they basically, on conviction, if a probation order is requested and granted, means that the individual does not reoffend for a period of 1 year. And the consequences of reoffense with a probation and order in place are quite, you can go to jail actually. I've never known anyone to go to jail. I've never known that to be pursued, but I think it's important we preserve the right to ask for probation orders, and that people before the courts know that this is our way of proceeding. So I have a great long windy motion here. What I'm going to suggest is that I not move it and leave it with Fred to come up with tweaks to the document
including
and definitions, and to come back with a revised bylaw enforcement policy for our consideration.
Well, we need, Your Worship, we need some kind of direction from council to proceed. Now, the resolution has been on screen during this entire time as we've been going through the discussion. So I think if council wants to forego the reading but still pass the resolution, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if council instead chooses to just pass a motion directing the clerk to bring back amendments and leave the definition, that's fine as well.
Amendments based on this document and discussion of council. How's that? Okay, seconded by Melinda. So the direction is that you use the motion document today that was not introduced, plus the benefit of what you've heard council say, to come back with a revised bylaw enforcement policy. Okay. Any opposed to that? Motion is carried. Let's have a...
My apologies, I missed the mover and seconder. My head was down.
Fred moved and Melinda seconded. Okay, so let's break for 10 minutes and hopefully we can move things along.
That's 10 minutes by my watch.
Yeah.
are back live.
So I have a motion that we accept Schedule A to this agenda. A mover, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Davey. Anything on Schedule A that anyone feels strongly about? Oh, sorry.
Your worship, we did add an item of new business.
Yes, okay. Let's deal with that. And Kim, I gather that is a grant application that you wish to make of the county?
That's correct, Your Worship. There's an opportunity present at the moment, a grant program that's being provided by the County of Dufferin. The program is to the Municipal Emergency Readiness Fund. And in filling out the application, which I would like to apply for 2 AED machines, one to be used with our soccer program. Right now, we're presently taking the AED machine from the town office building, so we remove it from the office building about 3 p.m. on Wednesday afternoons and have it back in the container by 8:30 in the morning on the Thursday. But the fact is that we are removing it from the office here so that we have one out at the soccer program. And the second is with our pickleball courts and the amount of use that we are going to be getting through with those courts, to have an AED machine on site in the storage area down there, which is accessible to the public. So I have checked to make sure that AED machines are something that we can apply for under this grant program, and they are. It is a 50-50 grant program where for every dollar that we are approved by the grant program, we are to add $1. I'm looking to purchase 2 AED machines, and they range anywhere in price from about $2,500 to $3,000 per machine. So I'd apply to the program for $3,000 for a $6,000 purchase. I've spoken with the treasurer, and he has said that funds are available for our $3,000 portion of the purchase should we be, what's the word, should we be granted the program, successful, thank you, should we be successful in receiving the grant.
So do I have a motion?
Motion would be that council for the town of Mono approves submitting an application to the County Municipal Emergency Readiness Grant Application Fund for 2 automated external defibrillators.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Capes, seconded by Councillor Davey. One comment, Kim, and that is instead of looking to our treasurer for those monies, maybe we could make an application to a couple of the very successful service clubs locally. They seem to have a lot of money these days.
I've also will be making a phone call to the pickleball club as well.
Okay, excellent. Any further discussion? Any opposed? That motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to Schedule A. And do I have a mover for did I get a mover? Yep, and second it?
Did you do it, or was it interrupted?
I think it was interrupted. Okay, so just to clarify, did we? Fred, do we have a mover and seconder on Schedule A?
No, I do not.
Okay, let's repeat that then. Councillor Capes, Councillor Davis. Okay, Schedule A, items. It's a record, Councillor Capes?
Well, let's start at number 1.
Oh, no, we're not going to do each and every one.
It's going to be a long meeting.
Just start at number 1. Well, thank you again to the treasurer. I just want to understand the September 7th.
Excuse me, Councillor Capes, could you use your microphone?
Thank you to the treasurer. I want to make sure I get that out there. The September 7th to September 20th report under the expenditures, the variance, I see on bylaw/parking enforcement. So we've expended $140,000, but we only budgeted 100. Is that true, or am I reading that wrong?
You're kind of reading it wrong. The 100,000 that we budget, that is the budget for up to the end of August. So we should be at 100 instead of 140. So we did budget more than 100 for bylaw enforcement, but because this is a year-to-date comparison, so the budget column is where we should be at. Because I take the budget, depending what it is, divided by 12, and after 8 months, so it should be at a certain amount. Now, Councillor, if you recall, I'm not sure if it was the last meeting, I had reported that we're over budget because of legal bylaw enforcement costs. But yeah, we did budget more than 100 for bylaw enforcement. For the year, yes.
Any other items on Schedule A?
I don't know where it is on it because my notes I left at home, unfortunately. But the one about the police. Just to jump out at one, because I don't have my whole list going down from the top, which I'm not as prepared as Elaine. The one on the police, is this just stating what we already do, or are they proposing that all of the municipalities will have new appointments or for a new committee? I was not clear on that.
Well, this is the police board configuration. It's basically confirming what we've known for some time, and that is that we cease having our own police services board and we join up with Mulmer and Melanchthon going forward. We fought very hard to maintain our autonomy, but the province seems to be into the bigger is better mode, and these police service boards were costing us a fortune, which they weren't. Ours costs about $550 a year, and notwithstanding that, we were at least successful in avoiding one big service board for the entire county.
Because the Orangeville and the us three and another three, those are still going to be separate. It wasn't clear to me.
Yeah, there's another configuration, and then I think Orangeville and Shelburne are standalone. But there was a proposal on the table where you didn't even have a guarantee of having a representative on the police services board, because they wanted to limit the number of members, and then smaller municipalities and maybe even Mono would have to literally rotate membership on the police services boards throughout a number of years, and we successfully fought that idea. Fred?
Yeah, on number 14, I just wanted to ask staff, are we doing anything about that Amaranth resolution? They're quite hot to trot on this, on shared services. I think maybe we've discussed parts of this in the past. I'm not sure if I should be looking at Mike or Matt. Things like when we buy salt or sand or gravel, would we get a better price if we went in a joint bid with Amaranth or something? I mean, or all the Dufferin municipalities could street sweeping, grass cutting,
line paint,
all that stuff. If we work together with other municipalities, now I don't know how you'd have to put a contract out, big one, and then I don't know, we have to split it up among the municipalities in terms of how we pay for it, but that should be fairly easy. Have you looked into that at all, either Matt or Mike?
Thank you, Deputy Nix. So we've worked through the process. There's always been line painting, for example, grass cutting. Grass cutting for Mono is 37 to 40 properties. Pretty large firm that takes care of us already. Line painting, we do it at different times in the county, and our price per meter is comparable. What it does allow us to do is control when the action happens, and we're in control. The salt, we're on a, municipalities are definitely on a process of just-in-time delivery. So we are very happy with the way that Goderich treats us with respect to receiving our salt. Salt would be something that we could look into, by all means, but the other services, I think that the residents of Mono are better suited with us running the process. With respect to trucks and things like that, the cost of a grader is the cost of a grader. They don't seem to change in bulk, and the alignment of our useful lives are different. County's at 8, I think we're at 12 to 15, so tough to line those up. But we look at things, and I know that we owe council a report on the services that we already do share. And those are things that will come to council, and we could probably better vet this conversation then.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was a result of a motion that I moved here to have less report on economies of scale, savings, buying groups, what efforts have been made. I was unsuccessful in getting county council to pass the same motion, which I found very interesting.
Anything else?
Oh, I'm so bad.
No, I'm fine. Anything else?
No.
Yeah.
Just one wanting to ask, the one about the notice, which I don't know, seems kind of moot now, but number 8, how they're going to return the lands that maybe somebody was going to sell back to the Greenbelt, and then now I hear he's going to return it all to the Greenbelt, and then today I hear they didn't go with a motion, but they went with that they're going to come back with something, the government, as opposed to what was proposed. What about, now that the Greenland and the development in that respect, what about some of the other issues that we as, like when you talked about, having a house on an additional house on a property that came up this morning, that, it could be that if I've got 96 acres and I could sever it now, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in the air. Do we have any sense on whether there's still lobbying for some of these other issues, or has everything all just been funneled into the objection about the green belt, and so all those other Bill 23 and Bill 91, and they all just have to keep...
No, Bill 23 is still there, but they did back down on the idea of allowing every farm to have 4 severances. That's off the table.
It is off the table.
Yeah. I see Dave Troutman has joined us, and maybe we can redouble back to the issue of the monster homes as well. It's not working, Dave.
Yeah, just a second here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it's going to get resolved this afternoon, hopefully. Anyway, to answer, so Deputy Mayor Nick's correct that the issue of the automatic acceptance prime land and agricultural land is off the table. The permission note for a 3-unit dwelling in an urban area where the municipal service is still part of the Bill 23 provision. I mean, as for this particular item on the Schedule A, what's important to remember is that there was an about face down on the 22nd, I think, Thursday, by Premier Ford to put what were lands taken out of the Greenbelt back in, but the whole of the Greenbelt lands are still under review for further consideration. So it's sort of hit the reset button. We don't know yet whether some of those lands or others will be identified down the road for removal from the Greenbelt. That factor aside, I wrote a report not long ago on Bill 23, and I cited the report from the Regional Commissioners of Ontario that said, Mr. Premier, we have enough land in existing towns and cities with full services to reach that target of 1.5. So we don't know yet where that will go. We've got a new minister in charge. He, of course, asked you as council, and for all councils to identify some of the goals in the Housing Affordable Task Force report. And we'll take that as it is and see what comes up the other end on that initiative. That's about all I can offer at this point.
David, can you just very quickly address the issue of when the meeting is scheduled for the monster homes?
Right, so that, I was hoping to bring that in September, but we had a bit of a staff change up, as you're well know. So I do have it for, hopefully for the next October meeting. I've got to check timelines under the Planning Act for pre-notice. If not that, it'll be in the 1st of November, that's for sure. Okay, so not lost on me. I've got a report almost ready to go, and that will be for the public meeting for that.
And if you could circulate whatever you have to council as well as whatever the obligations are under the Planning Act?
Will do, yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Any other Schedule A matters? So call the question on, I think we had the vote on accepting Schedule A? Let's just call the question on that. Any opposed to Schedule A? So that has taken care of Schedule A. Reports of members of council and staff, and let's start with Melinda.
Just to keep you up to date on the 236 First Street, there's the sidewalk's almost in there. Orangeville spent some money and put that in, and it's going to be opening, probably doing a ribbon ceremony at the beginning of the year, January, maybe February. You'll notice if you go by lots of changes coming up soon on the exterior and then the interior, but it's all going gangbusters, and we'll be up and running soon.
You'll recall that the pre-COVID there was a plan from the Ministry of Health to amalgamate boards of health. There are 33 or 34 boards of health in Ontario. There was never any reason for this that I was aware of. Maybe big is better. It was proposed at that time that Dufferin, Dufferin Wellington Guelph, our Board of Health, would merge with Halton and I think Mississauga. That was not looked at favorably, as we would be the little guy on the block and maybe having difficulty making our needs known. And also our Board of Health, I think is one of the better ones in the province functioning. Anyway, it's back on the table again. Amalgamation is back. And I attended a Ministry of Health briefing on this with about 70 other people probably 2 weeks ago. And they're going very soft on this. They're saying that we want you to come up with some plans and make some proposals to us. There's options are to either merge places, different boards, or to merge services of boards, or to do something which got as a merger written on its notice, and that would be helpful. And if you don't merge it, well, we'll do it for you. That was the final line. It was a very interesting meeting, because at the very end, the very last question from one of the members of the audience was, what will happen if we don't do mergers? And it was basically, well, we'll do it for you. So our Board of Health, they has an executive committee, which I'm not on. It involves people who are the chairs of each of the subcommittees and the chair and the sub-chair, I guess 4 people, and our medical officer of health. And they're working on this and trying to stick handle and see what we can do that will satisfy requirements and also improve the board. The second issue on the Board of Health is that COVID vaccinations will be available in mid-October. This will be made available along with the annual flu shot. There's been no information available as to what particular variety of COVID they're dealing with, but that's coming along. And the recommendation is if you haven't had a flu shot for 6 months or a COVID shot for 6 months, then you're a candidate for another booster. The NVCA board meeting was last Friday. The only thing of interest was we discussed the budget. And the proposal, which was approved without my support and 2 other people's support, was for an increase of 14% in the NVCA budget. And the other thing that's made it very difficult, of course, has been the reclassification of the activities of the conservation units into Category 1, 2, and 3. And Category 1 is the mandated activities of the conservation authorities. In terms of money, that amounts to about 89% of the total budget of the Conservation Authority. And then Category 2 are things that you as a municipality might ask the Conservation Authority to do for you. Maybe it's to do some survey or some evaluation, and that's about 1% of the budget. And Category 3 is the non-mandatory. These are things like education, other activities that the board does. Don't have them here, but this is what's created all the issue. And the province brought this division into 3 different categories to try to decrease the cost on individual municipalities. And they're saying there are some things that municipalities do not need to agree to, such as education or studies on scientific studies, etc. And this amounts to about 10% of the budget. So what has happened and this has happened here in town, I recall, Doug Hebner, who's the chair, has visited or been in touch with every one of the 18 municipalities for education and requested whether or not they want to take part in the Category 3 or not. 18 of the 18 municipalities have agreed to take part, but the deadline is the end of December. So Doug is asking for an extension of the deadline till March, and I think that I suspect this will be given in the hope that we can get the other municipalities on side. It's not clear to me why they are not on side, whether it's just a matter of time or not. And if we do not have the, if there's a shortfall in money, the plan is to take it out of reserves. That's for this year. And that's all I have to report.
Just on the health unit, at AMO, the Minister of Health made a very guarded statement about amalgamation or rationalization of health units. What she said was that monies would be available to those units that were pursuing options. There was no threat to knock heads together and force amalgamations in the event that one chose not to. So this is very revealing that the penny has dropped here, that they're about to try and well, they're about to ruin something that worked extraordinarily well during COVID. And, you know, nothing, it's just breathtaking that they've gone back on that jag.
If I could just add to that, the money is available for any cost that might be incurred by consulting or asking for evaluations about what the implications, financial or otherwise, would be. So it's not any money to the health unit for current support, right, which is mainly from municipalities, but it's to deal with the costs that might come up through the amalgamation process. Yeah, she was very soft on that, but the reality is they want amalgamations. So I have some knowledge about what is being considered, but it's at a very early stage, so it's not worth sharing. But it's to get away from the big municipalities to the south, which would sort of gobble us up, I think.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
I mean, thank you, Mayor. Isn't amalgamation meant to on paper bring down cost? Isn't that?
That's what they always say.
Right? That is, right? Just that would be why.
That's why.
Not to deliver better service or anything like that, just cheaper. Right?
Maybe the cost, the support of the health unit is mostly by municipalities. we support them, as does Wellington well, and the ministry supports, but it's a modest amount. I think they have difficulty in dealing with 35 individual little bodies. And it's easier to deal with 8 or 9. I think that's a part of it. It's a part of a governance issue. And there may be more to it, I don't know.
Well, it's like police service boards, fewer meetings to attend.
I've 2 or 3 things. One, at the Credit Valley Conservation, they presented a draft budget. It's actually quite modest. Total expenditures are going to propose to be up by 5.5%. The municipal levy would be up by 4%, which I think is quite reasonable. Mono's share of that levy would be $15.6 thousand, which is up 3.2%. The COLA increase that Credit Valley is using is 3% this year, which I quite frankly think is modest. I hope we don't lose staff for that. But here's the really big issue at Credit Valley Conservation. Of the total $28.9 million collected in levy money, $28.9 million, $27.8 million of that comes from the region of Peel. And when the region of Peel disappears, the question is going to be, is Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon going to pick up that tab? I've had a couple of opinions on this. They're just opinions. No, we won't know for a year. I mean, they're going to take all of 2024 to decide this. But there's some, if they don't pick up that tab, Credit Valley Conservation is going to be fundamentally changed. It would be totally different body than we see it today. The second thing I have to report, Melinda was with me, is the Shelburne District Fire Board. The total expenditures proposed for next year are $825,000, which is up 14.4%. The big change here is we are adding another full-time staff member. Our secretary-treasurer is part-time, and the workload has increased and increased and increased. We're now expecting next year we'll probably be up to 400 calls a year. So it's more than 1 call a day, and there's paperwork involved with all of this. The levy charge to municipalities will be up 13.4%, but I warn you, this is before the fire board has decided on a COLA clause for the volunteer fire workers. So it's going to be higher than that. But then here's the really big news. We haven't decided on the capital budget, and we have penciled in for 2032 a new fire hall, and believe me, we need it. We did hire, who's the engineer at Broadway and First Street? He looked at our current building.
Markets.
Who?
Markets.
No. Burnett, yeah, Steve Burnett. He looked at our building. We can't add to it, so we need a new fire hall. We've penciled in $15 million. We copied the Orangeville expected cost of their fire hall, which is now over $15 million, and we penciled it in for 2032. So they've given us 2 choices on the capital budget for next year. The high end is a 25% increase in the capital to the municipalities. So we're going to have an operating budget that's going to be up by probably 15 to 17%, and we're going to have a capital budget up by maybe 25%. So those are the 2 boards I sit on. I can't remember if I've told you this before, but the other news is concerning Credit Valley Conservation and a proposal we put in with Mike's help. The town of Mono and, well, CVC with a minor part being played by the town of Mono have put in an application for a grant, which we're very hopeful of getting, $241,000 over 5 years from Environment Canada and Climate Change, if I got the name correctly, and that would be to take control of Phragmites in Island Lake. It's a really good proposal, and I was impressed by the way CVC staff and Town of Mono staff worked together on that proposal. My last item, which probably I don't want to take your thunder, Kim, but are you going to report on the CVC Town of Mono monitoring? Yeah, you're going to. Okay, so I'm finished.
All right, so since we've last met, Melinda and I did attend the Rosemont Fire Department.
Is your mic on?
Melinda and I did attend the Rosemont Fire Department meeting. We have 4 new recruits, and we can report that 100% of the crews are fully certified to the new standards. The draft budget will come to the next meeting, but they're looking at a 4.5% COLA. Fundraising already happened, and the Day in the Life already happened, so I hope you enjoyed those if you went out to those. I also attended the party in the park, and I couldn't believe the number of cars on the road. So it wasn't just for the neighborhood, it was everybody that had a radio. There were people there who were on their way home from a cottage to Oakville who stopped. And it was like, okay, this is big. They did a great job, so that was good. I attended the Mono Center Bicentennial Dinner. The committee should be really commended for what they carried off on that whole day. I wasn't able to make the daytime events, but it sounds like baseball is going to be a comeback in Mono Center, and that's awesome. The dinner was really wonderful. And I know they're going to talk to Kim about the lighting, because there's no dimmer switches, and it's kind of, oh, they couldn't find them then. Yeah, see, there you go. It was like sitting in a fluorescent lit room anyway. There you go, that's good. And I also attended a DEI workshop that was put on by the town of Shelburne for their staff, but they invited other municipalities to join them, and it was very good. So Ropal, one of our ladies from our committee, and Mike and I attended, and so we'll take that information back to the committee. So that's it.
Thank you, and I should have mentioned the bicentenary event. The three of us were there, and it really was a huge outpouring of community sentiment, and I saw people I haven't seen in 40 years at that event, and they came from quite far distances, people who used to live in the community who came back for that party specifically. So they deserve a lot of credit for what they pulled off.
And Dan Deedles was great.
He was indeed. He was indeed. He's sometimes very self-effacing when you're talking one-on-one, but when he gets in front of a crowd, the actor's blood in him comes out and puts on quite a performance. Okay, staff, who wants to go first? Kim.
Well, just in following up with the bicentennial event, I was able to attend the daytime portion of that event. Unfortunately, I had a prior engagement for the evening, so I wasn't able to attend that. But again, I've heard nothing but positive comments for the evening event. I can tell you the daytime event was just as spectacular as the evening event. They did run the community baseball game, which I thoroughly enjoyed watching. Definitely was not going to be a participant, but I certainly enjoyed watching. They had the good old tug of war games with the rope. They had three-legged sack races. They had egg on a spoon race. They just had all of the good old games, and they were very well attended. They had Jonathan Neville, who was teaching dance on the multi-purpose pad, different types of dance. It was everything you can think of. They had it going. They did a community barbecue where they gave away hamburgers and hot dogs for free, which was, you know, lots of people were saying, wow, this is incredible. And it was a very well-attended event. So I was very, very pleased with that. Just carrying on, I also attended a meeting last week with the myself and Dave Makowski from the town. We attended a meeting with the CBC with Bill Litster and Yasmin Slater out at Lynn Gibson Park to discuss the access of individuals using Lynn Gibson Park as an access point into the CBC, Island Lake Conservation Area. And so in follow-up to Council's direction, what is going to happen, or what we've come up with, is that there will be a camera placed in the parking lot up in the trees so that we will be able to have monitoring of the number of cars that are in the parking lot at any certain time. as well as then a trail counter put at the entrance to the CBC from our entrance. So if, for instance, if we see from the data collected on the trail counter that at 2 p.m. on, or between 2 and 2:15 p.m., 15 people passed from our park into the conservation area, we can then go back to the camera in the parking lot, and we can say, well, that's very interesting because there were no cars parked in the parking lot at that time. Or, wow, the parking lot was full at that time. So it will give us an indication as to how many people are actually walking in, or who are residents who are walking into Lynn Gibson Park and then walking into the CBC versus how many people are driving. So we thought this was a great way to start the collection of data to see what we can find from this. The hope is to have it, not the hope, but we will have it installed prior to Thanksgiving weekend so that we're able to get some data collected over some of the busiest times during the highlight of the color season. We'll collect data for approximately a month, more if council wants us to, and then a report will come back to council on what we find.
Excellent.
Okay. Next thing is just letting you know that we have started back up a yoga program at Mono Center, which I was really pleased. We've tried this a couple of other times and did not get the number of registrations that we required. This time we went into partnership with a yoga instructor, and it has worked extremely well. We have 10 participants in the program every Tuesday morning from 9:45 to 10:45 at Mono Center. And it's running for 6 weeks as a trial. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully this will be some type of indication to us as to how many types, this type of event or this type of activity that people may be interested in attending. So we'll see where this goes. This has worked out to be a great partnership between the instructor and the town of Mona, the way we've set up the fee structure on this. So. And the last thing to let council know about is that the passes for the tennis courts, that program that Andrew has so wonderfully set up for us on our website, is working out phenomenally. We are getting a number of people applying for the passes, and they're free from now until the end of the season. And people are very much enjoying our tennis courts up at Lynn Gibson Park. Unfortunately, we have already had some vandalism done to them. Didn't take them long. So, but it was just prior to the courts being open. We hadn't opened them yet. They weren't quite ready. And so some individual decided to take a chainsaw, or not a chainsaw, but some type of saw, not to the actual lock on the gate, but the actual mechanism on the gate that holds the lock on. So that's a big black piece of steel. And we have the piece, Dave Mikowski has the piece. We're trying to get another one to replace it, but someone actually hacksawed off this piece right off of the
Who
gate.
takes a hacksaw to a park?
Yeah. So just letting council know that we have managed to secure that portion of the gate in another manner at the moment, a temporary manner, but we are trying to get it repaired. So.
Do we have cameras at those locations?
No, and I'll bring some comments to council about that in an upcoming meeting. I want to see how these cameras work out in the parking lot. They've got an SDM card in them, and from what I understand, they're the type of cameras that use. Like, they're nothing too elaborate, but they work out in a field, such as, I'm not a hunter, but this is how Bill described it to me. And there's an SDM card in it that is replaceable every 2 weeks, and then you just go and replace the card, and then you have the card with all your data on it from 2 weeks. So, and I'm not one to understand the electronics of these sorts of things. I think they run on a battery, so we don't have to worry about Wi-Fi or anything like that. Once I know more about them, then possibilities for where they may be installed, I'll probably be bringing to you.
Thank you. Matt, anything?
Thanks, Mayor Krillman and Council. A couple good things I'm happy to report. We finally got the asphalt on third line north of Hockley. Pretty much wrapped up. There's been a lot of disruption down there the last year between the riverbank restoration and the base asphalt, the grading and everything. So that'll be wrapped up hopefully by the end of next week, the shouldering, and hopefully council will approve the top course asphalt during this year's budget. So we get that on there next year. Also, we finally got the herbicide application on all our storm ponds, both Riverside ponds, Riverside Drive storm ponds, Orchard Drive, and Starview last week. So we got the permits from the MECP to apply the Habitat Aqua herbicide, and we've got lots of drone photos of that, and we're able to get in there and knock that off our list. So it's appropriate timing considering we're getting late in the year, but we got it done.
Yeah, Fred.
Have we hired our seasonal workers yet, or have there been any problems getting seasonal workers?
Thanks. We haven't hired anybody yet. We haven't had very many applicants, but we're working on it. We've had a couple interviews, and we are working on it with hopes to have somebody in by next week.
Ralph?
A positive comment about the third line bank rehabilitation is that I think it's very, very nicely done. It's very natural. You wouldn't think that somebody had been in there plunking rocks in. And so congratulations.
Now, I have had one impassioned email about the paving third line and the concern about potential increased speeds and walking. Is there any way that lines can be painted at the side that sort of create not quite a bicycle lane, but demarcate an area for people walking, children going down to, the example given to me was children walking down to the Hockley Road to catch the school bus?
Too narrow.
Is it too narrow, or can something be considered?
Thanks, Mayor Krillman. Yeah, it is a bit narrow for edge painting. It's kind of a unique area because of just the way everything, the river and everything else, it's kind of encroached on the road over the years and the deviation there. It is a posted 40. Council passed a bylaw 2 years ago, I believe, to make that a regulatory posted 40. It is on our list for solar speed signs. We have inquired about the pricing of purchasing more solar speed signs. It might be a good spot for it as you're heading southbound into the village through there. So that's something that we could look at, and potentially some share the road signs, similar to what we put on First Line 5 or 6 years ago and 7th Line, north of 15 Side Road. So that's another option.
I'm going to ask the question, but going through Wasaga Beach, because I travel through there a lot, through those roads, and they have a traffic calming zone, and they have traffic calming tables, and those work really well, because they're not the bump that everybody slows down. They just control the traffic to stay at 50, so I'm not sure if that's something we've thought about.
It's definitely something that we have in-house. We've had one on Kingfisher Drive. We've put they're removable. I know Wasaga, they've paved them in. They are a challenge for plow trucks. We've recently had complaints from emergency services transporting individuals in ambulance and creating that extra bump for staff and the patient. So that's a bit of a concern from emergency services. But we have put them in, like I said, I believe Kingfisher, French Drive, and Bayberry. So they have been effective. It's something that we could definitely look into as well. Coming down the hill through third line there from Dunby, I think approaching that paved portion at the North Bridge, a solar speed sign coming into the village would be probably my first recommendation.
And I wouldn't rule out the notion of line painting on the sides. There's not a lot of room there, but it is a fairly well-established fact that where you narrow the lanes, you do get a traffic calming effect. And I think it would serve two purposes. Number one, create an opportunity for people to walk with maybe more of a degree of safety, and at the same time slow the traffic down. So I'd keep it on your radar. Ralph?
I came up the third line today. I admired the asphalt there, and there's a bit of a drop-off, though, from the asphalt to the old shoulder. Is that going to be filled in?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Manklow. I believe by the end of next week, we should have the shouldering completed.
That will improve the walking ability immensely. The other traffic calming device that I've experienced down in Forks of the Credit is where they put a little post that's in the midline in the center of the road, and it really slows you down. And probably it's a pain in the neck for big trucks, but...
Yeah, there's some maintenance issues there, especially in the wintertime. I think a lot of them pull them out. I know Thornton has some pretty Township of Avessa has a bunch of traffic calming devices and tables and signage in the posts. Bond Head, East Gwillimbury, West Gwillimbury have similar type of things, and they seem to be effective. It depends on the situation, depends on the area to kind of implement pieces at a time, I think, to see how effective they become. But OPP is definitely would help us out, especially with it being a posted regulatory 40 zone too. So encourage motorists and residents through there to contact OPP.
Thank you. Les?
It's more for information purposes. I guess we talked about the budget timetable and the OPP contract extension. During council, I actually got an email from Financial Services OPP, got their new contract amount for 2024. It's actually going down by approximately 14,000, so about a 1% decrease in the OPP contract. So some good news for next year.
Is that a decrease on top of the existing decrease, or was this decrease anticipated?
That's a decrease from what we're paying this year.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further? Yeah.
So I just want to remind council about the emergency support services trailers. I emailed that to everyone. I heard back from a couple of people. I don't know if anyone else is going to be able to make that rollout and photo op this Friday at 1 p.m. So I've heard from 2 members of council. Is there anyone else that's going to be able to attend that? No.
Possible.
Okay.
I respond. Could I just add one thing on Friday? Did the rest of you get an invitation that there's a National Day of Reconciliation and there's a ceremony? You all got that? Okay, I planned it. Did you get it?
There's one at the
Hospital
in the garden at
Yeah.
7 a.m.
7 a.m.
And then there's one on the Saturday in South.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay. Anything else, Fred?
That's it for me, Your Worship.
Okay. Mike?
Your Worship, if you wanted to do Dave, and then I'll go last.
Oh, David? Oh, a little loud.
Okay, how's that?
Not working.
Yeah. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so just 2 things briefly. You saw the email that came through Fred Simpson about the Affordable Housing Task Force final report. That's just really a reminder, I guess, at this point to council members, you have an October 16th deadline to give the new Minister of Municipal Affairs your top 5 measures in the Affordable Housing Task Force final report that you think are, an incentive for housing in Mono. I mean, I think they want it fairly specific, municipally-wise across Ontario.
David, are you talking both on the computer and your phone?
I have to talk on my phone because my microphone's down on my laptop through the software.
It's too loud. If you could hold the phone further away.
Okay, how's that?
Okay.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, as far away as you can. We can hear you.
Okay, so the other, again, there's many projects on the go, two of which, as you well know, have gone to appeal for different reasons. I'm not going to get into them. The only other matter is the provincial policy statement and the growth plan went through a consolidation exercise under the Ford government. And I will be bringing council report back on some report on that later this fall. It is due to be finalized this fall anyway, so I'll try and time that for the Royal Assent Day when it happens. Beyond that, Committee of Adjustment on Thursday, FYI. That's about it for me.
Okay. Mike?
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, Councillor Capes and I did attend that session. It was great. I'm working with the DEI committee, hopefully on working on a education platform for staff for the coming year. That should be all covered under our membership to the CCDI that we enabled once Council first started the DEI committee. As Council is aware, we are in a joint municipal water agreement, supply agreement with Amaranth, Orangeville, and East Garifraxa. Orangeville will be sending a letter in the coming council meeting with respect to the Pullen Well. The Pullen Well is located on the west side of County Road 16 and or the Mono Amaranth town line. Orangeville is looking for some solid backstops for their water issues, and the Pullen Well will trigger the rerunning of the Tier 3 water model. That's being spearheaded by CVC. CVC, in a meeting that I attended last week, said the province is pretty ecstatic that this four-person agreement, four municipality agreement is in place, and we're getting along pretty good with this. The required funds is outlined in a percentage based in the model. Orangeville is hoping to have some estimates as to what the rerunning of the Tier 3 water model will look like. And I've also reached out to the CAO of Agila regarding the Hockley Church and Hall, and look forward to talking with them.
There's nothing further. Notices of motion. I'll just serve notice that at the next meeting I'm going to... Oh, Elaine, sorry. No, go ahead.
I would just like to, I'll formulate this somehow, but I want to put hunting back on the table. When we campaigned last year, we heard a lot from residents about hunting and their personal safety and their fear for letting their children go in their own backyards. And already hunting season is here, and I just think we need to bring that back to the table to talk about how we can manage hunting in Mono.
Okay. My notice of motion is pursuant to the change in our bylaw enforcement policy. Hopefully the change is made by council, but just to let everybody know, I'm going to have a motion to make the transport trailer truck issue a high priority, if not the highest priority. Any other notices?
It's lunchtime.
Okay. I have a motion. No in-camera matters today. I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the town of Mono in session 18-2023 held on the 26th of September 2023 to be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Moved by Councillor Capes, seconded by Councillor Manctolo. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. And finally, and we're going to do this before 1 o'clock, I have a motion that we adjourn this meeting at 12:57. Moved by Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Capes, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for the new copy of this.
Half an apple just doesn't cut it.